ceremony from Parliament. We'll focus on the people's expectations and, of course, President Jacob Zuma's address. We'll catch all of this live on SABC2, Channel 404 and your favorite radio station on the 9th of February.
Yeah, warm and hearty good morning to you. This is the Newsroom team. We are the Newsroom show. I'm Newsroom. Very good morning to Elvis President. Hi, Elvis.
Good morning. I'm very well, given you.
Yeah, good. Good. Of course, it's a sad day for South Africa and South African sport. So, well, we want you to interact with us on the late, great Joost van der West days. And how do you remember the former Springbok captain, Joost van der West days? Of course, who can ever forget 1995? Elvis President. Sorry.
Well, I'll not be rock and rolling, but tributes are pouring in from around the world for the former Springbok captain, Joost van der West. He died yesterday at the tender age of 45 after a long battle with motor neuron disease. So we're asking you that question this morning. How do you remember the former Springbok captain, Joost van der West? Let's take a look at what you have to say. There's already some tweets coming in, people talking to us about that even.
Yeah, Lechasa, a regular contributor on the show, says, no, this is not the tweet we should be looking at. We should be looking at the Joost van der West days and tweet. Okay, we'll get back to the Joost van der West days and tweets, what you just saw on screen, of course, obviously, because, well, we're conducting a poll around tolerance within places of worship. One shouldn't narrow it down to churches. We've seen in the recent past, there have been quite a few incidents of, well, unhappiness with the way that places of worship treat the LGBTI community, Elvis.
So we're asking the question on the poll, should places of worship that discriminate against the LGBTI community be held accountable? So far, 100 votes in, 57% of you are saying no, they should not discriminate against the LGBTI community.
What's the question?
In fact, no, the churches should be held accountable, rather, for 57% and 43% saying no. Here's Lachasa with that comment here.
Yeah, he talks about religious freedom. Let those churches find discriminating be held accountable and be suspended for 20 years. Finish and clear, he says. As a tough stance on it, but yes, religious freedom does not mean you can infringe on the rights of others, obviously.
Leslie says, the Bible is in itself a very homophobic book. Well, there's another take there. Nobody has ever properly analyzed its hateful effects on society.
Well, Leslie, in theory, banking is not allowed in the Bible. So if we read the Bible selectively, you'll always find things that will be problematic. Muhammad Salim Murad says, they should make their own religion because Islam, Christianity does not accept them and they cannot impose.
This one from Hamilton Charka says, places of worship don't discriminate. They tell the truth, as it is written in the Bible.
In the Bible, Hamilton, you were also allowed to marry your sister 2,000 years ago, which today is not allowed. So maybe we should think about how selectively we read the Bible.
Monwabisi says, yes, they should be held accountable.
Straight and to the point. Keep it coming. We want your tweets because we're going to speak to all stakeholders today, Elvis. We're going to speak to, of course, the CRL shortly. But there's some weighty interviews to come on this matter.
Some weighty interviews. We have the good Dr. Mochecha. He'll be in to discuss a religious perspective for us as well and see what we can get from there.
Yeah, so we want you to interact with us. Send us some questions because that's what the show is about. We want you to get comfortable with what is happening out in our society right now. But first, let's get into our work with the morning's news.
Former Springbok captain Joost van der Westhuizen's public memorial service will be held on Friday at Loftus Versfeld Stadium in Pretoria, and later that day he will be laid to rest in a private funeral service. The Democratic Alliance says free higher education is not the solution to the country's escalating university fees. And the fate of the suspended U.S. travel ban policy may be decided today by the country's federal appeal court. Very controversial story there, and we'll keep you updated on that story. But first, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. Very good morning, Kendall.
Gentlemen, a morning it is good, definitely not. This is the first day after we now know that Joost van der Westhuizen has fallen, that he's gone, he's no more. A lot of people are sad. A lot of people are looking back on what the man has done for rugby in general and South African rugby specifically.
Now, Eben has got a story to tell because you covered that 1995 World Cup.
Yeah, I did. I travelled, as a sports journalist back in the day, I travelled a lot with the national teams, both rugby and cricket teams, and Joost van der Westhuizen, he was always nice to me. There were other players that weren't during that time. It was a different time in South Africa's history, you know, to be travelling. I think the only two non-white guys at that time was Chester Williams and me to travel with the teams around the world. So it was a difficult time, but Joost was always a guy that was nice to me. Ended up playing a lot of golf with him later after his retirement and so forth. And for me, he'll always be the guy that's changed the game. He changed the way that Scrummers play the game today. He's a modern great, and we have to remember him as such.
I remember him as a gentleman because I visited him at his house with him and his wife, and we did an art program at that point in time. And he was such a gentleman, and you could feel the gentle soul in him, you know. And
wonderful
he will be
man.
sorely missed.
Wonderful man, wonderful man. I have only fond memories of him. You know, it was a difficult time for all of us because we were kind of all thrown in together, and I think a lot of people didn't handle it too well. Joost was the one guy who handled being around me and a guy like Chester at that time. He handled it very well, and I'll always remember him for that.
All right, now that's very interesting. We have messages of condolences that have been pouring for the man. I think I remember him like everybody else does, as that wasn't as closest to him as you were, but as a leader, as a person who actually got the Springboks into that space where everybody looks up to them and hopes that they can emulate the Springboks. This is what else we've got coming for you in the sports today.
We've got an important game tomorrow, and that's the main focus, is to try and win tomorrow's game and then look at obviously Centurion.
The Proteas are intent on edging closer to inflicting a serious whitewash on the touring Sri Lankans when they meet for their fourth ODI at Newlands this afternoon.
It's about how we apply ourselves and not really looking at who's chasing or who we are chasing, but like just looking at our course and finish it as best as we can.
The PSL rolls back into action after a long hiatus, and SuperSport United are keen on retaining their status at the top of the log. We will be coming back to you shortly with sports a little later, about 10:40. For now, it is back to Elvis, who's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. And that's our top story this morning. South African rugby legend Joost van der Westhuizen's memorial service will be held at the Loftus Stadium in Pretoria this Friday. Now, that's according to his charitable organization, J9 Foundation. The foundation went on to say that a private funeral service will be held later the same day. The 45-year-old van der Westhuizen passed away at his Johannesburg home after a 6-year battle with motor neuron disease.
Van der Westhuizen was diagnosed with the disease early in 2011 and showed tremendous fighting spirit as he did during his rugby career. Desperate to find a cure and assist those suffering from the disease, he established the J9 Foundation and, despite his condition, worked tirelessly in promoting the foundation's work. The foundation said in a statement following his passing that Van der Westhuizen was given a 20% chance of living for more than 2 years, but he defied all odds and lived for almost 6 years.
Yeah, obviously, we've been expecting it, unfortunately, and hoping it won't happen, but he put up a really brave fight, and, I think he made the world more aware of this terrible, terrible disease, the way he went around the world fighting on, and being a brilliant example for everybody. Look, I was fortunate to play with him, to play against him, and we had great times on the field together, and the team became like a family. So it's a huge loss, but I think what stands out most about him was the way he was a fighter on the field and off the field.
Made his Test debut in 1993 and scored a try in his very first Test match against Argentina.
Chance just pops it into, and this is a chance here for Ruben Creer. He's got Van der Westhuizen in support. Yes, Van der Westhuizen, a try on his debut.
He played 89 tests for the Springboks and scored 38 tries, which was the record when he retired in 2003. Van der Westhuizen played in 3 World Cup tournaments, the most famous one in 1995, when the Springboks won the trophy. He was part of the 1998 Tri-Nations winning team, which he captained.
The test match is over. Joost van der Westhuizen is the skipper and the winning skipper for the first time in his career.
He captained the Boks 10 times, including at the 1999 World Cup, where the Boks beat England in the quarter-final, before going on to lose to Australia in additional time in the semi-final. Van der Westhuizen was also nominated for the SA Rugby Player of the Year award 6 times in the 90s. Among his other achievements are 2 Currie Cup titles and an induction into the World Rugby's Hall of Fame. Joost is survived by his 2 children, Jordan and Kylie, his parents Gustav and Mariana, and 2 brothers, Pieter and Gustav. Harry Wollivier, SABC News.
Meanwhile, former Springbok coach Heineke Meyer also paid tribute to Joost van der Westhuizen.
It's very sad, but I think we must celebrate his life, and he gave so much, and especially the last few years of his life, he changed so many people's lives. I've known Joost since he was a youngster. His family, he was still a student, and so I've known him for probably most of his life, and the things that stood out for me is his fighting spirit. He was a true warrior. In 2002, nobody gave us a chance to win the Currie Cup. The Bulls was in a really bad state, and Joost was my captain, and he changed that whole team, and he was a guy that fought from the front. But I think a part of Joost that nobody knows is that he also had a soft side. And I remember when he was at the end of his career, he had a small function, and it wasn't a media function, and what was really great for me is, because it doesn't usually happen with players, he gave a jersey for every single guy that made a difference in his life, and there was 15 of us, and he gave us a framed jersey and just thanked me and his fellow coaches, and even his schoolboy coaches and the physios that helped him through his injuries. So he was also a guy that really appreciated what we've done for him, and for that I'm still shocked at the news, but for that I'll always be thankful, and he was an inspiring leader.
Of course, that's why we're asking you that question as to how do you remember Joost van der Westhuizen. Let's take a look at some of your comments on the Twitter handle and see what you have to say. The question on your screen right there, how do you remember the former Springbok captain Joost van der Westhuizen? Let's take a look at what you have to say. This one coming from David Campisi. Oh, you remember David Campisi? He says, Rugby World lost another great person and player. Joost will be remembered for the great fight he had to fight. Rest in peace, my friend. Oh, there you have it. This one coming from Tom Harron at the bottom. Can we scroll up? Yeah. This one from you, Laurie, says, rest in peace, Joost van der Westhuizen, taken by the infernal motor neuron disease at 45. Not a thorn, but a dagger in English society. It's a brilliant man he was. Brian O'Driscoll, remember him? Another brilliant player there. Rest in peace, Joost van der Westhuizen, an incredible player and fighter to the end. The first of the new age's nines. Joost van der Westhuizen, there you have his picture, 20th February 1971 until February 2017. And that's where we got to leave it there. We'll come back and show you some more of those comments and some of the tributes pouring in for Joost van der Westhuizen. Meanwhile, the Democratic Alliance here at home says that free higher education is not the answer to escalating university fees. The party was one of the groups that made presentations to the Fees Commission. President Jacob Zuma set up the commission last year to investigate the feasibility of free higher education.
6 of the Fees Commission. Its focus is on funding models for tertiary education, the DA1 student funding agency, NSFAS remodeled, and for universities to receive bigger subsidies.
If you just give more and more money to fees, you're not going to solve the basic problems. One of which is a lack of subsidy money to places like universities. And this is the reason they keep putting fees up. They're not getting enough money. So if you address the subsidy question, you will be addressing the fees question.
Financial experts say it's not sustainable for government to fund free education. They've put forward other options that include a mix of public and private investment funding models.
This bond would be investors giving money to an intermediary. Usually this would be the private equity firm or an asset manager to manage the funds.
More parties, experts and civil society groups are expected to make presentations this week. Patricia Fasagi, SABC News in Centurion.
In international news now, the U.S. Federal Appeal Court will hear arguments later today over whether to restore President Donald Trump's temporary travel ban on people from 7 Muslim-majority countries. Now, it's the most controversial policy of his 2-week-old administration. The lifting of the ban by the U.S. District Judge James Robart on Friday has opened a window for people from the 7 affected countries to enter the United States. The new Republican president has said that the travel measures are there to protect the country against the threat of terrorism. Opponents say the 90-day ban is illegal. It bars entry for citizens from Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria and Yemen, and also imposes a 120-day halt to all refugees. Well, there you have it. That's your news for now. Now, today we focus on the LGBTI community and their acceptance into places of worship. Let's start that conversation with Yeben.
Yeah, obviously the dust is settled now a little bit. Now we can have a sober conversation about this issue. Of course, a couple of weeks ago, a Ghanaian bishop preaching at the Grace Bible Church here in Soweto in Johannesburg became the center of a social media storm. This after homophobic comments were broadcast across various online platforms by the outspoken celebrity Samizi Mhlongo. During Bishop Dag Heward-Moore's sermon, the bishop said animals have multiple partners, but one would never see creatures of the same sex partnering up. That in itself is wrong. Mhlongo, who was attending the sermon at the time, stormed out of the church after he deemed the sermon offensive. What is the role of religion in the LGBTI community? Are members of the LGBTI community welcome in mosque or churches or any other place of worship for that matter? Now, to talk about this, we are joined by the Commission for the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Religious, Cultural and Linguistic Communities. The CRL chairperson, Tokumkwanazi Kaluva, is with us. Please just note that we also invited the Grace Bible Church for an interview, but they respectfully declined that offer. Very good morning to you, ma'am. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
In South Africa, are we stuck in a scenario at the moment where the selective reading of the Bible is becoming problematic?
I think we're at the crossroads, and I think it's an opportune moment which we should use as a nation to start debating issues of freedom of religion, freedom of association, freedom of expression within a constitutional framework. What does it mean, actually? Yeah. So that at least as we move forward, we find ourselves and we find one another in this very heated debate.
We're running a poll, and I wanted to get your opinion and your view on how people actually are voting, because it's a little bit concerning for me. We asked the question, should places of worship that discriminate against the LGBTI community be held accountable? Of 106 votes, which is a fair idea of what society outside are thinking, 58% say no, places of worship should not be held accountable. Is that a concern that almost 60% of our very own viewers don't see it as a problem that you can discriminate against an entire community?
I think issues of religion always bring that out in us as a collective, including myself, because people tend to want to defend the doctrine itself without actually looking at what are the issues. Because if I followed the debate well enough, it wasn't about the doctrine, because the doctrine in terms of Christianity is against adultery, it's against polygamy, it's against the whole range of things.
Yes.
One of them would be homosexuality. But the doctrine does not then equate people's behaviors to those of animals. Because then constitutionally, once you say even animals know better, then we are harming the dignity of those people, because you're saying they are beneath even animals.
Yeah.
So it's not about you pronouncing what is in the Bible, because that is a doctrine. The Bible is against certain things, and we go there so that we can be helped to do the right thing, whether we're adulterers, whether we're thieves, whether we're corrupt or whatever. So it's when you start analyzing it and equating behaviors to other things that it becomes unconstitutional.
Yeah.
So the Bill of Rights of people of a particular sexual orientation on that particular day, at that particular time, there was a violation of the Bill of Rights.
Right now, in South Africa where we are, we've got on screen, it says, are worship places accommodating? And I would want to ask you, are we accommodating enough of the LGBTI community, or is there a constant undertone of discrimination?
There is a constant undertone of discrimination within religious sectors, even within cultural sectors. We're also looking at the cultural sector ourselves and the issue of LGBTI communities to access their cultural rights. But there's also the issue of accessing your religious rights. And it's very difficult, because part of it is that religious leaders, pastors, reverends, and whatever, have not necessarily been made to understand the Constitution. What does the Constitution say about these things?
Yeah.
They might understand the doctrine of whatever religion they're in. And then you need to operate that doctrine within an environment that says we're all governed by the Constitution in this country. And you need to understand what the Constitution says.
Do we then need more education, especially to pastors? We see what pastors get up to, which is some of the most terrible acts in South Africa right now. But how do we educate them in understanding that the Constitution and human rights supersede what is written in the Bible in the modern day South Africa? Not just here, but all around the world.
Part of the proposals we've given to the religious leaders, which they are supposed to comment up until the end of February, which we're taking to Parliament, is that there must be basic education. You have a calling and you know the Bible or you know the Quran, there must be something else that you then learn about this world we live in, not the afterlife. So we're saying education, there must be a basic compulsory module that every pastor is going to be unleashed into communities understands.
Why do you think there's this selective reading of Scripture? And I'm talking about all Scripture because in Islam and in Christianity, for instance, charging interest on a loan is against the Lord's will. That means banking, modern day banking, is totally illegal and against, but we all have bank accounts. Actually, the churches have some of the biggest bank accounts, mind you.
I think it's in our veins to do that. You take what suits your mental capacity and your beliefs and your conscience at the time, and you leave what doesn't take you where you need to go to. So you take the correct bus all the time and you read the text as and when, you pick and choose what suits your frame of mind at that point, at that time. Hence, we're saying the guiding principle across all religions, across all beliefs, should be the Constitution.
And education needs to happen. In conclusion, ma'am, what did we learn from the latest escapade? It seems as if we have one every 3 months, but what did we learn from this one, do you think?
In terms of LGBTIs or in terms of...
in terms of the LGBTI community and the fact that maybe we need to rethink this thing.
You see, as a nation, we need to start thinking hard about what is the Constitution. What does it allow us to do? What does it not allow us to do? We need to think hard about the philosophy and the ethos that governs the Constitution, that we should be all embracing. We shouldn't marginalize people, and we should treat people with dignity and equality.
Ma'am, I thank you very much for coming in today and talking to us. You're always quite candid about this. I think it's a struggle that all South Africans will be facing in the months and years to come. Thank you once again.
Thanks.
Now, that's the chairperson of the CRL here in South Africa, Tokum Kwanazi Kaluva, talking to us about the role of places of worship,
and the LGBTI community. Of course, we were using the incident between the Grace Bible Church and Samizia Mhlongo as a case study. We did invite the Grace Bible Church for an interview, but after a couple of weeks they said that it's past and they don't want to talk about it anymore. We thought on the show that it's a constant conversation that we have to have, and maybe after the dust is settled it will be a little bit easier to be a bit more candid about what happened. Anyhow, you guys are tweeting us and you guys are telling us what you think with regards to this. Let's just take the poll quickly once again. This is the votes. Should places of worship that discriminate against the LGBTI community be held accountable? That's what we ask you. 58% say no, and that is a frightening number actually, if you're really honest and you look at what this is. It means you can discriminate and you should not be held accountable, which is against what is written in our Constitution. Unati tweets us and he says, the pastor didn't discriminate. He was telling the truth as the way it is. Yes, Unati, he wasn't telling the truth. He said there's no homosexuality amongst animals. There is many animals, including dogs. If they are set aside, they engage in homosexual acts. It's not true that animals don't do it. Lechasa comes, he said, let those churches find discriminating, be held accountable and be suspended for 20 years. Finish and klar, says Lechasa. Leslie says, the Bible is in itself a very homophobic book. Nobody has ever properly analyzed its hateful effects on society. Well, those are some of your tweets. Some of your tweets, keep it coming. We love this conversation. Shortly, we'll escalate. Well, after the break, we'll talk to Dr. Machecha about his views and, of course, how it taps into what we do here in South Africa. Let's take a look at what's on our social pages right now. Of course, the nation is in mourning for rugby legend Joost van der Westhuizen, who sadly passed away yesterday after battling with motor neuron disease. Jack Parow, of course, the Afrikaans rapper, posted this picture of him and Joost, and then even Piers Morgan posted this picture that is captioned, "Rest in peace, Joost van der Westhuizen, one of the greatest players to ever grace the game of rugby and a courageous hero of the field." What do you make of people who are now posting pictures of them with Joost van der Westhuizen that is late? You can tweet us on the question of the day at SABC Newsroom. Looking at what else is going on in the country today, of course, the mining in Indaba got off to, well, they say a great start in Cape Town yesterday. Now, the focus this year will be on the safety of our miners, and we'll give you an update a little bit later. Tomorrow we'll do several interviews around the mining in Indaba. Moving further afield, there are more than 5 million tweets about Lady Gaga's performance at the biggest sporting event in America. That's the Super Bowl. Still in the US, in the early hours of Monday morning, a green meteorite was spotted in the sky there. This photographer captured the marvelous phenomenon. Meteorite, they tell us. I don't know what that looks very dodgy to me. Anyhow, in the United Kingdom, Queen Elizabeth, Her Majesty, celebrates 65 years at the reign of the kingdom, otherwise known as the Sapphire Jubilee. There she is in all her glory, and sapphires, mind you. Those in the good seats, you can just rattle your jewelry. That's what you say. Let's take a quick look at our picture of the day. This one comes from Shafiq Muton, and it's captioned, "There's the great rugby chat tonight above. Rest in peace, Joost." Of course, well fought there. Welcome home, says Jonah Lomu, of course, who passed away last year at the age of 40. Two of the all-time greats of the world game. Now, our comment of the day comes from Craig Warner, who says, "The word legend gets thrown about a lot these days, but this guy was a true legend and a true gent in and out of rugby. I can vouch for that. Wonderful man, and he will be probably in 20 years' time be known as the greatest player South Africa's ever produced." Now, let's take a look at what's happening in the courtrooms here in South Africa today. In KwaZulu-Natal, west of Durban, do you remember the video footage of that went viral of a truck that plowed through a red light, a busy intersection in Pinetown in 2013 and resulted in 24 deaths? Well, the owner of the truck is expected to appear before the Verulam Magistrates Court. Gregory Govender
He's facing a charge of employing an illegal immigrant, Sanele May, and also failing to do background checks on his employee. According to the state, Governor's truck was also unroadworthy. We stay in KwaZulu-Natal. 6 men who were arrested in connection with rhino poaching. They're expected to appear in the KwaMsane Magistrates Court. The men aged between 30 and 40 are suspected of poaching rhinos at Tutluwe Umfolozi Game Reserve. Police recovered a rifle, a silencer, several rounds of ammunition and knives at a lodge where they were staying. We'll keep you updated on that specific story. After the break, we'll speak to Dr. Matsola Matshega about the issue around the LGBTI community and places of worship. Send us your tweets, don't forget. We'll be back after a short break.
Ever wondered what the State of the Nation address is? Well, wonder no more, because SABC News will bring you live coverage of the pomp and ceremony from Parliament. We'll focus on the people's expectations and, of course, President Jacob Zuma's address. We'll catch all of this live on SABC2, Channel 404, and your favorite radio station on the 9th of February.
Welcome back. Are religious and traditional places welcoming to members of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and intersex or LGBTI community? Now, this is the question that surfaced after a visiting bishop at the Grace Bible Church in Soweto was castigated for his homophobic comments when he said that animals have multiple partners, but one would never see creatures of the same sex partnering up. Outspoken celebrity Somisi Mhlongo found the bishop's comments offensive and he stormed out of that service. Now, to find out where the National Interfaith Council of South Africa, NICSA, stand on the matter between Somisi Mhlongo, the Bible Church, and the general community as a whole, we are now joined by the NICSA chairperson, Dr. Matsola Matshega. A very good morning, and it's a pleasure to have you, Doctor. First and foremostly, what do you make of the incident first that happened at the Grace Bible Church?
I think that it's an indication of the lack of tolerance. And also failure or neglect to accept that human beings are not created by ourselves, regardless of our belief system. So we cannot point fingers at other people because of their makeup, because they did not create themselves. So we must keep to our belief systems and not use them to discriminate against other people, because that would be unconstitutional.
Now, some would say that this was an isolated incident, but if we look in a broader sense, is religion open and accommodating to the LGBTI community in South Africa?
You see, religion is a matter of belief. Is a matter between the individual and his or her God. And therefore, and there are also many religions which are diverse paths to the divine, called God for want of a better term. And I don't see why there should be a special accommodation for that class of people. But at the same time, I don't see why religion should be used to discriminate against such people. Because as I say, they did not create themselves. They were created by the same God that the religious people claim to be worshipping. So there is, in my view, no religious basis for discriminating against these people. But if people, because of their religion, they find that practice offensive, they must keep it to themselves. And they must not move with it into the public space, because in the public space, unlike in the religious space, we are governed by the constitution of the country, which accept sexual orientation.
Talking about the constitution now, some would say that it is the sort of comments were made as discriminating against the LGBTI. But does the constitution supersedes the Bible?
You see, the Bible is not the only religious book. There are many, and amongst themselves, they are even contradicting themselves. Now, the Constitution is made for all the people, regardless of race, class, gender, and religion. And therefore, the Constitution should apply to all. So, as Mandela correctly says, religion is a matter between you and your God. So go and practice it where you practice it, but don't bring it into public space, because in the public space, we want a socially cohesive nation. So we don't want practices which will divide the nation.
Some would ask if church is not a public space, but even you also have a question that you want to pose to the doctor.
Dr. Mashekhe, if you can just look at me, sir. I hear when you talk about the public space, and it's very important, we respect public space, but it seems as much as there's a problem with that, there seems to be a problem with selective reading of Scripture, where verses would be sometimes taken out of context and absolutely by men and women who call themselves religious leaders would then blow that out of proportion. If we had to take verbatim everything that's in the Bible according to religion, things like banking and these would not be allowed. So how do we overcome this problem, as it were, of selective reading of Scripture?
We also need to understand that Scripture was written in a particular context, and that context is not valid for all times.
Yeah.
And therefore, to try and craft this on a stone and say it's valid for all times and for all people, it cannot be correct.
When we talk about the LGBTI community, we see a lot of, on the African continent, we see a lot of leaders calling the LGBTI community un-African people and people who don't believe in Africa. And there's a sentiment almost on the streets amongst us here in Africa that homosexuality is wrong and we must fight against it. Do we need to educate our people about the Constitution and the rights of the individual and all these kinds of things, or do you feel this is too much of an uphill battle?
You see, there is a culture. In Africa, this phenomenon always existed, but it was treated differently. Now, our Constitution allows the practice to be brought into the public space before people have been educated on it. And they get offended. So I think that we make a mistake of not adopting the Constitution and simultaneously educate the people on this Constitution. For instance, it is said that about 40% of the population haven't seen the Constitution or even read it. Now, how do you expect people to follow something that they don't know? Although we say ignorance of the law is no mistake, it's no excuse, but I think that maxim also goes too far.
Yeah, it's similar to people who've never read the Bible, but who take these individual pieces of Scripture and then try and force others to live by it. It will always cause problems in our society, wouldn't it?
And of course, you know, the Scripture also, people pick up on what favors the doctrine that they want to.
That's right.
They don't read, the Bible as a whole. Yes.
Elvis?
Now, Doctor, you did say that the Bible is full of contradictions. Is that the only scripture and doctrine that should be followed by everyone?
No. You know, if you look at the Bible, the First Testament is actually about the history of the Jewish people. And the New Testament seeks to say, no, there's a common moral for everybody. So the New Testament is actually an amendment of the Old Testament. So, and if you take the Old Testament, you have the Proverbs of Solomon, which actually come from the Egyptian Hermetic literature. So it's not even from God, it's borrowed from other ancient books. But you see, one must respect the fact that the Jewish people were making an attempt to find something that is supposed to be universal. But that was a mere attempt to do so. So we can't say that the Bible, in all respects, is a universal document that must be followed by everybody.
So what do we do as a society then, and what do we follow? Do we follow the Constitution as a means to create an equilibrium?
We must respect the right of people to believe in their scriptures. But we live in a secular society, and that secular society is governed by the Constitution. But at the same time, that's why we established the National Interfaith Council of South Africa, so that we can promote dialogue among religious denominations.
And that includes all?
That includes all, because principally, all these religions are sun-centered. They have so much in common with them. But because we lock ourselves in the churches, in mosques, and you know, we don't find an opportunity to see that these different holy scriptures are actually different ways of saying the same thing, and that they are reconcilable. So that's why South Africa needs a national interfaith dialogue to bridge these gaps and help create a socially cohesive society.
When do we start that dialogue, Doctor?
The dialogue has started. In fact, on the 23rd, Gauteng province will be launching the Gauteng Interfaith chapter. And one of the things that will be high on the agenda is the promotion of that interfaith dialogue.
We're looking forward to discuss that again with you, Doctor, the next time when we speak to you about the dialogue, because it sounds like interesting, and that where you can bring people together.
The Bishop Sivungu is the chair of Gauteng. Maybe I should give you the address. You can talk to him before that day.
Doctor, thank you so much for your time and joining us. That was the chairperson of the National Interfaith Council of South Africa, NICSA, Dr. Matola Mochecha, talking to us about the role of religion within the LGBTI community. Well, let's take a look at what you have to say with regards to the question that we posed to you today. This one from Tabani. He says, discrimination is wrong, but telling the truth as written in the Word of God shouldn't be taken as discrimination. John 8, verse 32. Well, that's another question that Dr. Mochecha probably can answer for you. Tabatso says, one day, a gay man will enter a mosque. That will be the day that Muhammad resurrects. This LGBTI thing is an indictment on Christ. Well, this one from Tabatso again, he continues, he says, it is freedom of association, not the responsibility to accommodate. That is now from the church's perspective. Well, there you have it. Azanian says it is unnatural if it occurs in animals. It is due to abnormal circumstances due to impose dominance. Please don't misrepresent the facts. These are your comments. You can keep them coming and let us know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on the Facebook page. Let's go over to Irvin.
Yeah, there seem to be many more questions than answers, but we'll try and get those answers. Anyhow, when the Grace Bible Church was thrust into the spotlight after this incident, termed by many as homophobic comments by a visiting pastor from Ghana, we went on and we spoke to the South African Human Rights Commission's Gashel Brooks and asked him what he made of this incident that happened at the Grace Bible Church.
Very unfortunate situation, and I think what it does immediately is it draws two rights into contestation, and that is your right to equality as stated in Section 9 of our Constitution, and then as well as your right to freedom of religion, belief, as well as opinion. And what people then immediately think, especially based on this particular incident, is that the two immediately become mutually exclusive, and they're not. And that is not what we're advocating. We're not saying that people aren't allowed to believe what they believe. We're not saying that people shouldn't subscribe to Scripture and the laws stated in Scripture. But at the very same time, I find it interesting that the reference is made to animals, and humans are very unique animals, as you would agree. Very few other animals engage in sexual activity for pleasure, for example, as a means of bonding.
Yeah. But having said that, in the 21st century, how do we strike that balance between religious freedoms and human rights?
As I said, look, religious beliefs obviously stem within Scripture and tradition. And that's something that we're not going to deny anyone in terms of what they believe and what they believe, for example, to be sinful and what not to be sinful. And going back to the Bible as an example, in certain Christian denominations, circumcision is a must, in others it's not. Eating pork for some people is sinful, and consuming bacon and ham is not. So obviously we wouldn't want to make pronouncements on what is sinful and what's not sinful. But what we're concerned by is what our Constitution says. And what our Constitution says very clearly is that we have equality, and equality more specifically based on numerous things, including sexual orientation. And it's very interesting because we have one of the few constitutions in the world that actually outlines sexual orientation as a means of equality. In other words, you can't be unfairly discriminated against based on your sexual orientation. And I think that applies to all spheres, including within our churches, within our religious organizations. And that's what we're saying, is that please, let's be mindful of what we say to people and whether it's discriminatory or not.
Unfair discrimination in this case, Mhlongo feels strongly that the pastor was discriminatory against him. Can he lay a complaint with the Human Rights Commission about that?
Of course, definitely. And in fact, we invite members of the public that come across incidents like these to actually lay a complaint, and so that we can deal with it, because I think it's something that we need to thrash out. It's something that comes up regularly. You remember Pastor Anderson, the South African Human Rights Commission petitioned that he not be granted access to the country because of what he had said, specifically about the LGBTI community.
Going further, NGO Out, we spoke to them a little bit earlier. They indicated that this is much more than that, much more than discrimination. This is hate speech. How do you deal with that in a case like that?
Well, I mean, I don't want to go into too much of the merits of the matter, and the simple reason for that is because let's assume that Somizi does, or any other member of the public does decide to bring this matter to the South African Human Rights Commission. We would like to be able to assess it, obviously, based on the facts. But I mean, if you look at what hate speech constitutes in general sense, I mean, we can apply to race, we can apply to sexual orientation, gender, sex, whatever you may imagine. We need to assess whether it's hurtful, harmful, and whether it's an incitement as well. And at least two of those conditions are met by this. Yes. It was hurtful and it was harmful to compare people, their sexual orientation, and saying that it's worse than animals. Because that's derogatory, right? That's dehumanizing the person. So, yeah, it fringes on things like that.
So what is the message to South Africans in general? Because we have a democracy that we need to balance with religious rights.
Well, it's very simple. As I said, you are entitled to. The Constitution gives you the right to freedom of religion, belief, and opinion. It's a right that you have. What we're saying is that you can't exercise that right and then infringe on the rights of others. You know, the perfect example, I remember this from law school, was the swinging arm example. I have a right to swing my arms, but when there are other people near me, that right becomes limited because I could injure someone else in the process. And this is what happened in this instance. You have a right to believe what you believe. However, if you're going to make pronouncements that are hurtful and harmful and that actually infringe on the rights of other people, then of course you need to think twice about it.
Those that want to get in touch with the Human Rights Commission for some reason or the other, how do they get hold of you?
I guess the best way is for people using the telephone 011 877 3000. That's 300 rather. And of course the website www.sahrc.org.za. At the very top you'll see a tab for contact details. All the contact details for all 9 of our provincial offices are there. so people are happy to contact us.
And they can probably find some more information on the website as well, in terms of their human rights.
Of course, definitely.
Mr. Brooks, I thank you so much for your time and joining us here in studio. That was Gershel Brooks from the South African Human Rights Commission talking to us about what happened there between Somizi and what is the rights of the individual, the rights of the church.
Recorded, that interview was recorded. Just want to point that out to you. Now let's just take a quick roundup from around the front pages, or some of the front pages from around the world. We'll start in Israel, where the Jerusalem Post reports that tensions between Israel and militants in the Gaza Strip flared up yesterday, a day after a Hamas militant died in an accidental explosion in the northern Gaza Strip, and shortly after a large-scale Israeli Defense Force drill along the border there. Now, we move to New York. The Wall Street Journal says the Trump administration argued the president has broad authority to decide who can and can't enter the U.S. and that preventing him from doing so puts national security at risk, as it sought to persuade an appeals court to reinstate the travel ban. Moving to China, the South China Morning Post reports that Hong Kong Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying criticized the election platform of John Chang Chunwa, the former financial secretary who's hoping to succeed Jung in next month's leadership election there. Let's take a quick look at what you can get on our Facebook page. Of course, Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa has assured the Progressive Professionals Forum in Cape Town that he won't steal state funds. He was addressing the forum as part of the build-up to the State of the Nation address at SONA 2017 to be held at the Grand Parade later this week. Then, Gauteng Hawks have arrested 2 Chubb security personnel for a business robbery at First National Bank branch in Randburg in December of 2016. And finally, Mineral Resources Minister Mosebenzi Zwane says his department remains committed to closing the tragic chapter, the Lily Mine in Barberton in Mpumalanga. All of those and more on our Facebook page. You can also go to sabcnews.co.za for all the latest. Now, of course, today we remember the late, great Joost van der Westhuizen. We've been asking you to send us your comments. We'll talk about, well, we'll look at your comments and how you remember Joost, of course. How do you remember Joost van der Westhuizen?
I remember him as a World Cup winner. I remember the very first match that I saw a lot, because I've always loved rugby. I played it in school and so on and so forth. But I was one of the very few people that look like me who liked rugby in 1995. I'm in Res, College House, UCT, on Main Road, and they've just come back from the World Cup, and they've just won that opening match against Australia. Phenomenal stuff. The entire Cape Town was up in arms, and there I could see him passing by on the bus. I remember this man as a winner. I remember this man as a leader. I remember this man as a great Springbok.
Yeah, he's the ultimate winner. And you know, when you remember greatness, quite often, you know, you never get that in your lifetime. But I promise you, in 20 years' time, we will look back at Joost van der Westhuizen as probably the greatest Springbok of all time. Why I say that is because of the way the game changed after the emergence of Joost van der Westhuizen. After Joost van der Westhuizen came into rugby, the role of the scrum half changed. The scrum half became the general. You can look at all the teams, how they play today. In today's rugby, all the teams play off number 9. They play off number 9, and number 9 decides the tempo, decides the decision-making, and so forth. For Reed de Prayer, you can look at all the players that have followed Joost. The game changed after Joost van der Westhuizen played.
He was a master tactician.
Yeah.
And you know, people know him as a master sniper. You would get the ball, look up and try and actually read the field and read the game. And like you said a little earlier, Eben, the man, he scored 38 tries. And from a scrum half position, that is something to actually celebrate and actually behold with awe.
It will never be done again. There will never be another scrum half that will score 38 tries in 89 games. Only wingers and fullbacks will do that. So it kind of puts it into perspective a little bit. But I want to talk about the man, because I played a lot of golf with him after his retirement, because you know, I met him while I worked as a sports journalist, and he was always a jovial guy. He was always ready to crack a joke. He was fun to be around. He always made you feel better. One of those guys, after you left, you felt a little bit better about yourself and a little bit better about life. So it was very sad to see, of course, the last few years, but even during his illness, he with the J9 Foundation, changed the game for people suffering with motor neuron disease. And what people don't realize, there was another rugby player suffering from motor neuron disease here in South Africa. His name is Tinus Lanier. He was also a Springbok, and you know, it would have been very difficult for him, but you know, the J9 Foundation through Joost, they looked after him a little bit, and they helped Tinus during a very difficult time. So,
you know, we know what we have, Eben. We've got a lot of people that have actually been wanting to take part in this conversation, give us their thoughts on what they think about this man. We asked a question a little earlier, and Lorenzo Bailey has come in and said, I remember Joost as a brilliant rugby player and a real fighter who gave a lot to other people as well. Hashtag Joost.
Yep. Connor Nadzo says, Joost, an athlete with great personality on the rugby field, a giant in representing our country. May he rest in peace. He's part of our history, no doubt, Connor Nadzo. And I like what you say, because Joost was, for me, one of his greatest attributes was the fact that he was probably the best athlete of that time.
You know what, I'm getting goosebumps as we read these tweets. Freddie Peterson says, very sharp player. He could jiga and make opponents struggle to get him.
When Wabizi comes out, he said he was a very, very good rugby player and he never talked too much. Yep, that is true. That is true.
Tibato Mamurubela says, I don't probably before my time. Tibato, don't worry, you keep on watching this show. We will remind you and actually let you know who Joost is and exactly why it is we're celebrating him and actually making sure that we spend time talking about the rugby player and the man that Joost van der Westhuizen was.
Yeah, we remember Joost van der Westhuizen, and that's our question of the day. Of course, how do you remember Joost? Tell us what you think on that. Also, we'll be back at the top of the hour when we look at, well, religion, the role of religion, and the LGBTI community. You can tweet us on that as well. Don't go away, we'll be back at 10 o'clock. See you then.
Something called, what, threads or something? What is
Yeah, so people, you know, with a bit of sagging, so you're in your mid-40s, not quite ready for surgery, not entirely happy with the way your jawline looks, it has a bit of a jolly look, so that's where threads come in. So it's a non-surgical procedure.
What causes acne?
Common causes of acne are genetics, can be hormonal as well, so that's why you see it normally in sort of your prepubescent or your pubescent teenagers. There can be social causes as well.
Varicose veins versus spider veins.
Those large, big, tortuous blood vessels that run down your legs, those are varicose veins. They're typically more than 3 to 5 millimeters in size. And then those very thin, fine, thready veins, and they can be a variety of colors, purple, blue, red. So those are the spider veins.
Join Health Talk every Saturday for all your health news.
Probably we should ask the question, is the ICC targeting African leaders?
For the life of me, I would hate to be charged with crimes against humanity. Very few people can deny nor ignore that there are crimes being committed on the African continent at this very moment. Now, we need to be able to hold people to account regardless of where they are from.
South Africa has a body of international law that it's committed itself to, that seeks to counter impunity in the world when it comes to gross human rights violations. In this specific instance, we have a problem. By the way, you must remember that South Africa has a law on extradition and mutual legal assistance that enable us to extradite any fugitive of justice from anywhere in the world so that they can stand trial for whatever crimes.
So people with prostheses can live normal life.
Prosthesis actually manufactures the artificial limbs.
I can pick up stuff. My friends think it's awesome. I like my life.
I can walk normally. There's nothing that I can do. It changed my life from the beginning to where I am now.
Dystrophic dysplasia is a type of dwarfism that affected all my major limbs.
Join Health Talk every Saturday for all your health news.
Back to the newsroom. It's just gone 10 o'clock Central African time. We'll be with you for the next hour. That's myself and Kendall Mahamati, of course. Harry Karma is a famous author, and he's with us here today. We're going to talk about his book, 1,000 Tales of Johannesburg. Wonderful book, Harry.
Thank you. Looking forward to chatting to you about it.
Great stories about Johannesburg over more than 100 years, isn't it?
Yes. 126 years to be exact, yeah.
Well, we'll talk about it a little bit later because, you know, I'm an immigrant into Johannesburg.
Like everybody else in the book.
There you go. That's what I have in common. I'm an immigrant here and I love it in Johannesburg. But, of course, we've got business to do, and the tributes, well, they continue to pour in from all around the world for the late, great Springbok captain, Joost van der Westhuizen, of course, died yesterday at my age, 45, after a long battle with motor neuron disease. Yes, I'm a month older than Joost van der Westhuizen, so that kind of puts it into context now. How do you remember Joost is what we've been asking you, Kendall, and people are tweeting in feverishly because everybody loves Joost, don't they?
He would actually have turned 46 on 20th of February, just a few days away. And Lorenzo Bailey has come in and said, I remember Joost as a brilliant rugby player and a real fighter who gave a lot to other people as well.
Harry, did you ever watch rugby?
Yes.
How do you remember Joost van der Westhuizen?
Well, I remember him from 1995, you know, and of course he was the enemy. He was the Bulls.
He's a Bulls guy. Well, I grew up. I remember
I mean that 1995 team was legendary.
Yeah. You know, I have the same story as you because I grew up with a whole old Western Province, Streeptrek, and I hated Joost for most of my life until I met him.
No, I didn't quite hate him. I mean, he was a brilliant player.
I hated him with a passion until I met him later on when I became a journalist, and I tried to travel around the world with him, and he turned out to be a wonderful man. Joost, an athlete with great personality on the rugby field, a giant representing our country. May he rest in peace. He'll always be part of our history. Thanks, IH.
Then Golden comes in with, I remember about Joost is the number plates of the BMW cars at his wedding. To a more, it read, Joost and a more, very original. Rest in peace, Joost.
Well, that's on Joost van der Westhuizen. Of course, we're also running a poll. We're talking about religious tolerance and tolerance of specifically the LGBTI community. So we put this question to all of you. Should places of worship that discriminate against the LGBTI community, should they be held accountable? 124 votes in, Kendall. 57% say no, they shouldn't be held accountable.
Whereas 43% are saying they should be held accountable for discriminating against the LGBTI community.
Discrimination is against the laws in our Constitution. So guys, think about it. Think about it before you vote once again. Unati says, if it's not written in the Bible, why do it? Well, in the Bible it says banking's illegal, so why do banking then?
Golden Wire comes in again and says, at SABC Newsroom, religion should be respected. Rights and faith is not on the category.
My opinion. IH comes back. He says churches have their own laws besides the Bible itself, so we need not to blame them. if we disagree, let's open our own churches. Interesting view.
Yes, Lorenzo Bailey says yes, because if I discriminate against another culture or race, I could be jailed for crimen injuria. So what makes them so special?
Sobering thought there from Lorenzo Bailey. Lina comes in, she says, as a Christian, if I go to a Muslim mosque and they denounce Jesus, should I then feel marginalized? Fair question, Elina. Keep it coming. Of course, we'll continue talking about this and others. We'll talk about malaria. We'll talk about this great book, around 126 years in and around Johannesburg. But time now for us to take a look at the top stories at this very hour. Former Springbok captain Joost van der Westhuizen's public memorial service will be held on Friday at the Loftus Versfeld Stadium in Pretoria, and later that day he will be laid to rest in a private funeral service. The Democratic Alliance says free higher education is not the solution to the country's escalating university fees. And the fate of the suspended US travel ban policy may be decided today by that country's Federal Appeals Court. More detail a little bit later, but first let's go to Kendall Mahamati for a sports update.
Ewan, thank you very much. It is all about Joost van der Westhuizen today. Good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today. Messages of condolences continue to pour in for the fallen former Springbok captain and 1995 World Cup winner, Joost van der Westhuizen.
We've got an important game tomorrow, and that's the main focus, is to try and win tomorrow's game, and then look at obviously Centurion.
The Proteas are intent on edging closer to inflicting a serious whitewash on the touring Sri Lankans when they meet for their 4th ODI at Newlands this afternoon.
It's about how we apply ourselves and not really looking at who's chasing or who we are chasing, but like just looking at our course and finish it as best as we can.
The PSL rolls back into action after a long hiatus, and SuperSport United are keen on retaining their status at the top of the log. All this and more I've got for you in detail, but of course this hour will be focusing on Joost van der Westhuizen. For now it is back to Evan who's got the news.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kendall. Very good morning to you. If you've just joined us, you're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Our top story, South African rugby legend Joost van der Westhuizen's memorial service will be held at the Loftus Versfeld Stadium in Pretoria this coming Friday. That's according to his charitable organisation, the J9 Foundation. The foundation went on to say that a private funeral service will be held later the same day. The 45-year-old van der Westhuizen passed away at his Johannesburg home after a 6-year battle with motor neuron disease.
Van der Westhuizen was diagnosed with the disease early in 2011 and showed tremendous fighting spirit as he did during his rugby career. Desperate to find a cure and assist those suffering from the disease, he established the J9 Foundation and, despite his condition, worked tirelessly in promoting the foundation's work. The foundation said in a statement following his passing that Van der Westhuizen was given a 20% chance of living for more than 2 years, but he defied all odds and lived for almost 6 years.
Yeah, obviously, we've been expecting it, unfortunately, and hoping it won't happen, but he put up a really great fight, and, I think he made the world more aware of this terrible, terrible disease, the way he went around the world fighting on, and being a brilliant example for everybody. Look, I was fortunate to play with him, to play against him, and we had great times on the field together, and the team became like a family. So it's a huge loss, but I think what stands out most about him was the way he was a fighter on the field and off the field.
He made his debut in 1993 and scored a try in his very first test match against Argentina.
Chance just pops it into you, and this is a chance here for Ruben Creer. He's got Van der Westhuizen support. Joost van der Westhuizen, a try on his debut.
He played 89 tests for the Springboks and scored 38 tries, which was the record when he retired in 2003. Van der Westhuizen played in 3 World Cup tournaments, the most famous one in 1995, when the Springboks won the trophy. He was part of the 1998 Tri-Nations winning team, which he captained.
The test match is over. Joost van der Westhuizen is the skipper and the winning skipper for the first time in his career.
He captained the Boks 10 times, including at the 1999 World Cup, where the Boks beat England in the quarter-final, before going on to lose to Australia in additional time in the semi-final. Van der Westhuizen was also nominated for the SA Rugby Player of the Year award 6 times in the 90s. Among his other achievements are 2 Currie Cup titles and an induction into the World Rugby's Hall of Fame. Joost is survived by his 2 children, Jordan and Kylie, his parents Gustav and Mariana, and 2 brothers, Peter and Gustav. Harry Olivier, SABC News.
Former Springbok coach Heineke Meyer also paid tribute to Van der Westhuizen.
Very sad, but I think we must celebrate his life, and he gave so much, and especially the last few years of his life. You know, he changed so many people's lives. I've known Joost since he was a youngster. His family, you know, he was still a student, and so I've known him for probably most of his life. And the things that stood out for me is his fighting spirit. You know, he was a true warrior. And in 2002, nobody gave us a chance to win the Currie Cup. The Bulls was in a really bad state, and Joost was my captain, and he changed that whole team, and he was a guy that fought from the front. But I think a part of Joost that nobody knows is that he also had a soft side. And I remember when he was at the end of his career, he had a small function, and it wasn't a media function. And what was really great for me is, because it doesn't usually happen with players, he gave a jersey for every single guy that made a difference in his life, and there was 15 of us. And he gave us a framed jersey and just thanked me and his fellow coaches, and even his schoolboy coaches and the physios that helped him through his injuries. So he was also a guy that really appreciated what we've done for him, and for that I'm still shocked at the news, but for that I'll always be thankful. And he was an inspiring leader.
Of course, Joost van der Westhuizen passed away after a 6-year-long battle with motor neuron disease. Earlier, SABC News caught up with Karen Casey from the MND-ALS Association of South Africa to tell us more about motor neuron disease, or MND, known as amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS. This is what she had to say.
So the ALS stands for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and basically it's a broad term for the kinds of muscle weakness or muscle wasting that occurs in this disease, where specialized motor neuron cells actually start to degenerate both in the brain and in the spinal cord.
So I take it that there are different kinds of MND?
There are. There are 4 different kinds based on the type of nerve cell that's affected, as well as the part of the body where the symptoms first present. But ultimately, all 4 types lead eventually to muscle wasting or muscle weakness, and that would affect your speech muscles, your swallowing muscles, your breathing muscles, as well as your arms and your legs and your trunk.
It's amazing how you take things for granted. Every single day, just for me to hold this pen is the simplest thing, I think, but you get something like this and it turns into almost an impossibility. How do you get MND? Is it something, genetic, or is it something you pick up? How does it work?
So there are many theories that abound regarding the cause of MND, and researchers have kind of put it down to a perfect storm of factors. So there's suggestion that there might be an environmental or chemical toxin component, an infective viral agent component, perhaps even an immune component. And then, of course, in more recent years, they've discovered that perhaps repeated blows to the head or to the spine do in fact precipitate one towards MND. A study that was done amongst rugby players specifically found that there was a 6-fold increase in the chances of getting MND with that repeated body injury. Genetically, though, we only pick up MND in about 5 to 10% of cases.
Now, erecting sporting facilities is an important part of any sports nation. And as such, the Minister for Sport and Recreation here in South Africa, Fikile Mbalula, will officially hand over a multi-purpose sports court to the Rosedale Intermediate School in Atkinton in the Northern Cape today. The school was adjudged to be the fittest primary school in the country after it participated in the Let's Play Physical Education Challenge last year. The school was also rewarded with a grand prize of 1.3 million rand purpose-built sports court. The court has already been installed at the school. We now cross over to our reporter in Uppington, Neria Tlakotsa.
Of course, the official unveiling of this is expected to start any minute from now. We are expecting still the MEC for Education in the province to be making her way to the school. We can already see some dignitaries here making their way to the school also. As you can see behind me, some of the pupils are already just playing around this 1.3 million rand project, this 1.3 million rand rather sports court. And we spoke to the kids earlier on. Some of them did indicate that they are enjoying this and they're excited about this opportunity. You must also remember this is not only meant for sports only, but also mental stimulation. We did also hear from some of the people who are around this, or some of the people who planned all of this, that they were saying that amongst other things they want to challenge the social issues that are faced in this area. However, right now I am joined by the DDG for Education just to speak to us about the importance of having such initiatives in schools and how, of course, they will help young pupils around every community. Welcome to SABC and thank you for joining us. Let's just talk about this initiative. We can see today it's the official unveiling. How is this and how is the department feeling about this, especially when we look at sports and education?
Look, this is a very exciting day for us in the Department of Basic Education. We initiated the physical challenge about 2 years ago in 2015. So this is the second year that we've run the program. And what we're trying to do is to revive physical education in our schools by challenging primary schools in this instance to become part of this specific initiative. So the initiative works on the basis that you put learners through a physical education challenge, and the number of learners that you get through the challenge in 45 minutes, that's the number that would then win the competition. And the winning school then gets a 1.3 million facility like the one that we're unveiling here today.
And one could also argue that this could be a disturbance to education.
Absolutely not. I mean, sports and physical education go hand in hand with education. There's a lot of studies that show that when children are physically active, they actually do better in school. It teaches them teamwork, it teaches them about the rules of the game, they participate better, they're more active in class. And so, you know, good schools offer physical education and sports.
There you have it from the DDG of Education. And of course, now, as we do know that this school managed to beat at least 651 other schools across the country. And one thing that the principal of the school further indicated is that this will help go a long way, especially because we do know that the school caters for children who are not better off, or children who are living under constrained conditions. Back to you in studio.
Yeah, Neria Tlakotsa coming to you live from Uppington in the Northern Cape. Now, moving on, the DA says free higher education is not the answer to escalating university fees in South Africa. The party was one of the groups that made representations to the Fees Commission. President Jacob Zuma set up the commission last year to investigate the feasibility of free higher education.
Phase 6 of the Fees Commission. Its focus is on funding models for tertiary education. The DA wants student funding agency, NSFAS, remodeled, and for universities to receive bigger subsidies.
If you just give more and more money to fees, you're not going to solve the basic problems. One of which is a lack of subsidy money to places like universities. And this is the reason they keep putting fees up. They're not getting enough money. So if you address the subsidy question, you will be addressing the fees question.
Financial experts say it's not sustainable for government to fund free education. They've put forward other options that include a mix of public and private investment funding models.
This bond would be investors giving money to an intermediary. Usually this would be the private equity firm or an asset manager to manage the funds.
More parties, experts and civil society groups are expected to make presentations this week. Patricia Fasagi, SABC News in Centurion.
Now, the mining in Indaba got off to a fiery start in Cape Town yesterday. Mining Minister Mosebenzi Zwane insisted that current safety laws would be respected following an uproar from some companies that say unnecessary safety stoppages are costing them millions. At the same time, Anglo-American CEO Mark Cutifani took a swipe at the notion of white monopoly capital.
The attendance numbers are up at this year's Indaba, suggesting some promise for the economy. Despite its declining trend over the decades, mining contributed 7% to economic growth in 2015 and employs close to 460,000 people. The mining minister, who wants a focus on junior miners this year, has been caught up in a tit-for-tat dispute over safety stoppages. Section 54 suspends operations if it is believed mine workers are at risk, resulting in major losses. But the minister says safety first.
The department will continue to enforce the legislation consistently, and I have full confidence in the officials who administer these laws.
While the minister said doors are always open and talks on regulation laws would continue, a dark cloud of uncertainty remains over the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Act. It's hardly moved since being published 4 years ago.
The mining industry has to have regulatory certainty and predictability in order for it to invest. Because at the end of the day, capital is unsentimental. It will go where the best investment opportunities are.
Anglo-American CEO Mark Cutifani took a swipe at the notion of white monopoly capital.
Black South Africans own more than 45% of our South African mining assets. If people want to talk transformation and see transformation, come to Anglo-American. While we are the first to acknowledge that we have a long way to go, let no one mislead you on the facts. If we're going to have a debate, let's talk about the facts and the truth.
Investors and industry players here largely have a common message: reinvigorate the promise of mining. But it's easier said than done if differences on policy remain unresolved. What is clear, though, is that if the resolution is not near, South Africa could miss out on another potential commodity boom. Devin Murrigan, SABC News, Cape Town.
Now, Parliament's refuted reports of tightened security and media restrictions during this year's State of the Nation address. It says allegations that journalists will need escorts to move around the precinct later this week are completely unfounded. Yet the Parliamentary Press Gallery Association has expressed concern over such reports, saying any such moves would impact on media freedom.
The media has always applied for SONA accreditation, and media houses working from Parliament generally have freedom of movement. But this year, media personnel will reportedly be housed in a so-called media square. The PGA says it's been informed by Parliamentary Security that the media will be restricted to this area and only be allowed to move around provided there are escorts.
This is so concerning because never in South African parliamentary history have journalists been put under such constraints. For journalists to be corralled in or penned into a specific area for an event like this, which is for the people of South Africa, this event is not about one political party, it is about the whole country. It's a State of the Nation address. It marks the start of the parliamentary year. If this is under the tight security, draconian security, then what does it mean for the rest of the parliamentary? And it gives a lie to being the People's Parliament.
Parliament insists the media square is a larger part of the precinct. It says reports of media personnel being assigned escorts are completely untrue.
The allegations of restrictions or the allegations of extraordinary security and curtailing of media operations has no basis, no foundation. Very clearly says nothing has changed in terms of the operational plans from what has been done over the past years or even a decade.
One change is certain at this year's State of the Nation address. The allocation of seats in the media gallery in the National Assembly will be reserved for selected journalists. The PGA has engaged with various media organizations on how to deal with the process. Abra Barbia, SABC News, Parliament.
Let's just take a look at the international top story. A U.S. federal appeals court will hear arguments later today over whether to restore President Donald Trump's temporary travel ban on people from 7 Muslim-majority countries. It's the most controversial policy of his 2-week-old administration. The lifting of the ban by the U.S. District Judge James Robart on Friday last week has opened a window for people from the 7 affected countries to enter the United States. The new Republican president has said the travel measures are to protect the country against the threat of terrorism. Opponents say the 90-day ban is illegal. It bars entry for citizens from Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria and the Yemen, and also imposes a 120-day halt to all refugees. Now, a drug widely used to cure malaria has failed for the first time in patients being treated in Britain, raising questions over whether the parasite is becoming resistant to drugs. 4 patients who contracted malaria in Angola, Liberia and Uganda had to seek alternative medicines after the drug they were given to combat this mosquito-borne disease failed. More than half of the world's population is at risk of malaria infection. Most victims are children under 5 living in the poorest parts of sub-Saharan Africa. Although significant progress has been made in the fight against malaria, disease still kills more than 400,000 people every single year. Now, to talk about this, we are joined from our studios in Pretoria by Professor Anton Stolz from the University of Pretoria's Institute for Sustainable Malaria Control. Professor Stolz, very good morning to you and welcome to the Newsroom show.
Good morning.
How concerned are you about what's just happened in Britain with the cure to malaria seemingly failing?
To answer your question, I would like to go back a little bit. If you look at the case report, 4 patients, and what they talked about in the case report, they said that there was treatment failure. They never talked about resistance. So I think that's important to mention. So of course, in all 4 of these patients, they did find strange or abnormal genetic variations, but not one of them could be associated with resistance. Now, if I can come back to your question, if this is true resistance, then we must be concerned. But at this stage, it cannot be proven.
What does it mean, though, for the world if this happens to be resistance, and what kind of what should we put in place in order to make sure that we don't go down this road?
Okay, I think it's important to realize that resistance to various drugs has happened before. As in the case of this current drug that we're talking about, it started in Southeast Asia and then actually went to Africa. So if this would be happening, I think we should be vigilant to actually try and look for where this resistance is coming from precisely, which countries it is, and what kind of resistance this is.
Yeah, in South Africa, what should we be concerned about the possibility then of drug-resistant malaria, and is there a chance of maybe going forward and talking about malaria in general, that more parts of South Africa could become malaria areas?
Yes, I think if one talk about resistance to malaria, what is important about it is that one of the infection control manners that we use is to use actually good treatment to stop the spread of malaria. So if we don't have a good drug anymore, what will happen is that, of course, you will have areas that you will have malaria, what was eradicated before. So yes, it is of concern, but at this stage, I don't think there's any reason to panic because we haven't proven it yet.
Is there enough funding for us in today's world? We see lots of funding for other cooler diseases, if I can call it that. Is there enough funding for malaria right now? Are we up to speed in the fight against malaria, especially in Southern Africa?
Let me first talk about the amount of money perhaps available from WHO and the report. It says around about $3.9 billion available. Only a small amount of that is available to us and also to basically look at the control of malaria, and even a smaller part is for research on malaria to do exactly what we need to do.
Prof, you get different kinds of malaria medication here in South Africa. One subscribed by the government and then one subscribed by private hospitals. What's the difference between the two?
There is actually not a big difference. If we look at the guidelines that came out in 2016, wonderful document that actually states that we should all be using the same drug. And this is exactly the best drug that we have. And up to now, in South Africa, we haven't had any failure.
Professor, lastly, by when will we know for sure whether there is a drug-resistant strain of malaria? When do you think the final details will be in?
Like I said, it is well known that in Southeast Asia, there is already resistance. I think what is now needed is that we start looking for it in Africa. And I think this document that was published is perhaps the best reason to start looking for it. And as soon as we find it, we can talk about what we're going to do about it.
Professor, thank you very much for joining us. Professor Anton Stoltz from the University of Pretoria's Institute for Sustainable Malaria Control, telling us, well, it's not here yet, they can't say for sure, but it is in Asia already, so chances are that we'll see drug-resistant malaria, and we will have to come up with a plan to deal with it, because it's a genuine concern to especially young people in sub-Saharan Africa. We're going to take a short commercial break. When I come back, I'll be talking to Harry Karma about his interesting book called 1,000 Tales of Johannesburg. Don't go away.
Today provide news updates giving a wealth of knowledge, breaking stories and crossing live for you. We follow business developments intensely. Experts and analysts tackle all challenging issues for you. We cover stories locally and abroad to keep you informed. We cover all sporting codes just for you. We are sure to give you weather to be ready for the day. Stay tuned to News Today at 3 p.m. from Monday to Friday on SABC News.
Welcome back here with Newsroom here on SABC News. Now, 1,000 Tales of Johannesburg is Harry Karma's mesmerizing novel that documents the lives of the inhabitants of the city of Johannesburg. It's the story of Sarah, who poses stiffly for a photo with her 4 children at the Terfontein concentration camp in 1901. Yes, and of Abraham, who paints the street names on Johannesburg's curbs. It's a tale of their grandson, Zweig, a young architect who's had to leave Johannesburg when he falls in love with the wrong person, and of Marceline, a Congolese mother who flees to the city only to be caught up in a wave of xenophobic violence. Yes, it's 126 years of Johannesburg, and to talk to us about the book, we're joined by the author, Harry Kama. Harry, good morning. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
An interesting story, more than interesting for me, because you kind of paint the story of Johannesburg over the last 100 and almost, it feels like two centuries almost.
Yes. Yes, it straddles 3 centuries, I suppose. It starts in the 19th, carries on through the 20th and into the 21st, yes.
And the story of the city through the eyes of these people, sort of interconnected. Why did you decide to go down that sort of route?
I think I'm interested in the way Joburg functions. You know, Joburg is basically a city consisting of small dorpies, you know, or towns, you know, whether it Rugby or Soweto or Davidton or Greenside. They're all little distinctive little towns, but this is more centered in the city center, and it deals with communities in the city center. There's an Afrikaans family, there's a Muslim family, there's a Hindu family, there's a Chinese family, there's a Zulu family, there's a Swana family, and I think that's about it. And we sort of, I tell the stories of these individuals.
So the nuance of the city from the late 1800s to modern day South Africa, is it a case of the more the city changes, the more it stays the same, or do we have stark differences now?
You know, it is very much, Joburg has always sort of been a mining camp. We've never lost our mining camp mentality. You know, we change, we break, we reinvent all the time. And there are tropes that come through, you know, in our history. Unfortunately, one of them is violence. The xenophobic violence of 2008 is not the first time it happened in this country. It happened in 1903 against the Chinese. It happened in 1914 against the Germans. It happened in the 40s between English and Afrikaners. You know, so that's what. So there's these little things that keep on repeating itself, which I found very interesting once I started reading around it.
It's really a story of immigration, isn't it?
It's a story of immigration and arrival, and not belonging and belonging.
It's really at the heart of the modern day city, and you say of the city of 100 years ago. But when you talk about immigration per se, can it be as simple as making it out that as long as we're doing well economically, everything's okay, but as soon as there's a downturn in the economic fortunes of a city, we turn on the latest incomers, or those who we see as coming to take our jobs.
I think it's the trope of the other, you know, those who are different, those who are not like us. Yes, it is quite that. I mean, some of the incidences were sort of politically motivated more than economic, but yes, it is. And that's what's so interesting. We're launching the book tomorrow night at Love Books. And one of the things we're going to talk about is the relevance of this story in this time of sort of Trump's laws and that, you know, it's all of a sudden this part of the book, which is but one part of the book, is, you know, very much on the agenda and very much on everybody's lips.
Now, you're an accomplished writer. You've 23 plays later, 10 books. Is this one of your favorite works, or do you look back and think, oh, that was really the one that stood out for me, or are they all your children?
I don't know. Sometimes you don't get it right. You know, sometimes you walk away from a project, or a few years later you think, wow, I didn't quite crack it. But this, up to now, this book feels good. And the measure to me is always audience reaction. And people really love the book. You know, people really respond positively to the book. Johannesburgers are quite interesting in that they love stories about Joburg, be it non-fiction, fiction, be it paintings, be it photographs. They buy, they're interested, they engage, and that's lovely to be part of that process.
I see that now a lot, and I'm also an immigrant into Johannesburg. I'm from Cape Town, actually from Stellenbosch, which is probably even worse. But you're right. The art in Johannesburg is very Johannesburg, and there seems to be a resurgence, especially amongst the artistic community, to really showcase the city. Why would you say is that?
I think, you know, a Zulu guy once who came from rural Zululand once said to me, in Joburg, you really have to look for beauty. And I think that has to something to do with it. You have to investigate and learn to love Joburg. And I think that's it. And I think Johannesburg is such an odd place, you know, for those who don't know it, you know, be they from the Platteland or be they from New York. They find it a really, really odd place. And I think we have a bit of a sort of nationalistic or civic pride in the city. So it's not that bad. It's great to be here.
It's a Joburg nationalism because you kind of feel ostracized a little bit. I feel that. I feel that though. Living here, I feel that, and I'm going to take that with me. Having to look for beauty. I think you have to go out and look for beauty a little bit in Johannesburg. But there's lots of beautiful people in this in the city, isn't there?
Yeah, and this is what the book is about. It is a celebration of the people. You know, I mean, the Chinese family arrived in the 1890s, the Hindu family 1890s, the Afrikaans family in the 1880s, the Zulu family 1890s. They've been here for a long time, and yet they're all a bit on the outside. And that is another interesting, I suppose it's because the city changes so fast. You're never quite sure where you are and how much you belong.
Yeah, it's a big city with a small dorpy mentality sometimes, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. If you said, I always make the joke, if you sit at the Park View bar, bowling club that doesn't exist anymore, you will see everybody in Joburg if you spend an afternoon there.
Harry, just to wrap it, what's next for you? What are you working on? What are you looking forward to?
I'm going back to your hometown that you got out of. I'm going to do a new play called Weg, which is totally different. It's about making art. It's about spending a life in theatre. And it's with my friend Marcel van Heerden and Tina Marie Prinsloo, and it's at the Westhuizen, and it will be in Cluttersville High School.
My gosh.
Really, is that your alma mater?
No, the other one. There were only two schools that we could go to back in then. One was Cluttersville High and Lukhof High, which the other one in
Sorry, it is in Lukhof High.
Lukhof High.
So I'll be going back.
Well, that's my alma mater.
I'll send them your love.
Yeah, please do, please do.
I'm really looking forward to that. That's very exciting.
I'm a big deal there. I'm a big deal in Ireland. Harry, fantastic, wonderful. Wonderful, thank you. Great to talk to you. Really enjoyed that. Great
and
stuff.
If anyone wants to pop in tomorrow night to Love Books in Melville, please do. It's going to be a joy.
Love Books in Melville. That's where you can go and interact with Harry himself. Wonderful man, great stories, love it. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll do more sport. Don't go away.
What the State of the Nation address is? Well, wonder no more, because SABC News will bring you live coverage of the pomp and ceremony from Parliament. We'll focus on the people's expectations and, of course, President Jacob Zuma's address. We'll catch all of this live on SABC2, Channel 404 and your favorite radio station on the 9th of February.
I wish you a hearty good morning. I would if I could. We've got sad news. We all know that Joost van Westhuizen, a former Springbok captain and World Cup winner, has died at the tender age of 45. This after a 6-year battle with motor neuron disease. Messages of condolences have been pouring in from the rugby world as friends and foes alike remembered him for his prowess in the field of play as well as his leadership. Let's take a look at what's been said about Joost van Westhuizen. First up, big, beautiful picture saying fearless, that he was. Caricature of him tackling Jonah Lomo. Then we've got one from Dan Carter. He says he was one of the few non-All Black players I adored. Such sad news. David Campese, he comes in as well. These are rugby greats, if you didn't know. Rugby world lost another great person and player, Joost, who will be remembered for the great fight he had to fight. Rest in peace, my friend. That's a beautiful photograph of Joost in his latter days with Tim Horan. Loved playing against, and with you, Joost, the most competitive player I ever played against. Tim Horan, you will remember, was a fantastic centre for the Wallabies. You're an inspiration to all. Johnny Wilkinson, another great, from the English side this time. Joost van der Westhuizen, a guy I feared as an opponent, respected hugely as a player, and will miss deeply as a very courageous human being. The inimitable John Smith, former Springbok captain himself, my schoolboy hero who became my teammate and captain. Our legend J9 finished his toughest match today, but will never be forgotten. Rest in peace, Joost. Bakis Botha, another one who was in the same union as Joost himself. He says, rest in peace, Joost. Now you are pain-free. Peace. Legend. From one legend to another. Anthony Klaassen, rest in peace, Joost. My hero as a boy growing up, wanted to be just like him. Sad day for World Rugby. Bonang Mateba weighs in. She gets involved as well. Rest well, champion. Heartbroken. Rest in peace, Joost. And there's an iconic photograph of two legends who've fallen and are gone. That's Jonah Lomu in Joost van der Westhuizen hugging on the field of play at the end of a match. Kenny Smith saying, the game they play in heaven just got a lot more entertaining. That's what's being said by you as well as others, greats of the game, talking about Joost van der Westhuizen and what they feel having him gone so soon at the tender age of 45. Just a few days away from turning 46. He'll have turned 46 on the 20th of February. Now, Simon Burke spoke to former teammate Henny Leroux as well as a motor neuron expert, Victoria Gottstein, last night. He started by asking her what the disease was. Have a listen.
Illness, it's neurodegenerative. At the moment, there's no cause. We don't know the cause, so therefore we don't know the cure. But I think from someone like Joost's perspective, the fact that he had the public platform, anyone facing a terminal illness is obviously fighting their own fight, but he managed to be brave enough to stay on the public platform so that he could promote and try and get funding and research done for the disease.
Right, well, Henny, I'm going to bring you in here now. Just tell us a little bit about your thoughts today on the passing of your friend and teammate, 1995 Rugby World Cup winner.
Yes, indeed. Well, it is a very, very sad day. In some instances, it's a bit of a release, I'm sure. But you know, it's never nice to see the passing of a wonderful friend and an inspirational teammate. You know, he was someone who epitomized the game in the truest form, a real legend of the Springbok. And it was just such a privilege to have played with him and against him. And, you know, he'll be fondly remembered by all those who he graced the field of rugby with.
And of course, we heard from Victoria what he was facing. From your perspective, from a player's perspective, it must have come as a shock, but also you must have got strength from the bravery that he demonstrated in the last 6 years.
Well, certainly, you know, and you put it in perspective, a little bit of shock because, you know, he was, you know, normal like all of us, and he developed this disease, and one starts hearing all sorts of issues surrounding possible causes and so forth, and we were exposed to all the same things that he was, so it was a little nerving for a lot of people at that stage, and you know, he rose above that and took the platform, as was highlighted earlier, and was willing to engage and push the boundaries to try and identify, you know, more about this terminal illness, and you know, hopefully that platform will continue in his absence.
Well, Victoria, you just heard what Henny had to say. Have we been able to learn anything new about this disease through Joost's experience?
I think because of his fundraising he's put into research, it has accelerated it. At the moment, there are no clear-cut answers, but we're hoping for the future to bring something about. I think from the perspective that Joost was, you know, such a fit, healthy sportsman, it also allows us to realize that this disease can affect anyone. It's not a particular type of person.
So it's not, you know, a knee-jerk reaction would be to say, well, he took a lot of contact in his career. That's not a
no, there's
definable
speculation,
cause.
but I mean, there are people that have had no contact and have the disease, and all ages and all races, obviously.
And Henny, from your side, did Joost get you guys involved in fundraising and bringing awareness to what he was facing?
Yes, he certainly did, and obviously it was not a nice sight to see him go backwards as fast as he did this last while. But he did put up an extremely brave fight for 6 years, and it was not easy to see. But I think in his approach and how he dealt with it, he made everyone aware, and a lot of people are aware of this disease now, and it is now on the front of a lot of people's minds, and hopefully they can find a cure, and he would have been instrumental in setting about the wheels of motion to achieve that.
Victoria, well, tell us more about Joost's work he did. I mean, he set up a foundation, and he was front and center and adamant that he's going to bring this to light and not hide anything from the world.
And I think that the fact that he has the public platform, being well known internationally, assisted him, because he could pull on people that needed to do it. It's a great loss to him and to his family in particular, but as far as the disease went, he was able to bring in a lot of funding, and we hope that it can continue in his memory.
I mean, what typified his his media stance? Because you kind of get the impression he let the cameras in to see him at his most vulnerable. Is that something he made a concerted effort to do?
Yes, definitely. I mean, it's a very personal situation that he was in, and he did allow people to see him at his worst. And it was a great platform to explain to people how it affects others. Because often with a terminal illness, people will just stay at home and won't be seen by anybody. Him being out there and being in the media allowed people to see the progression of the disease as it went, and allowed us to learn a lot from him.
And Henny, we all saw the pictures of Joost at the 20th anniversary of the 1995 World Cup. How profound and emotional an experience was it to wheel Joost onto Ellis Park turf?
Yeah, it's heart-wrenching, really. You know, he was always one that led the onslaught in a lot of ways, and he had an immense character. To have wheeled him onto the field was difficult. Knowing where he had come from and what his capabilities were. I mean, he was unique. He was hugely talented, a brilliant player, recognized and respected worldwide, and a hero to many. So, it's humbling to have seen him in that condition and live with him these last couple of years, seeing how he battled with the condition.
And the class of 1995, they've had a lot to deal with. Ruben Kruger as well, Jonah Lomu. You couldn't have expected this, surely.
Yeah, look, I mean, when it first came about, it was, it was very sudden and unexpected as such. And you're right, we were confronted with a number of illnesses, and it started very early for us. With a great respected coach through Kitch Christie and the suffering that he had through cancer, and then obviously Ruben followed. We've had one or two other parties that have succumbed as well, and as is with a circle of life, we have to prepare ourselves and enjoy the times that we do have, and that's what Joost did. He really maximized that time that he had left, and I think a lot of people appreciate him for the efforts.
There you go, Victoria. I heard Joost continued to try and live life to the full. What of his foundation now? What of his good work? How do you guys continue that on? Are there any tangible plans in place?
I would say the J9 Foundation do have a lot of plans in place. I'm obviously not, we're associated with them, but I'm not part of them, so I can't speak on their behalf. But I know that there's a lot of, continued research and fundraising to be done.
chosen as a deleted team, but also I'm very honoured to play with such a group of talented players, and it makes it so much easier for me because they're really high standard players and they also know what they want, and they're also leaders in their position, and it makes it so much easier for me.
How some of us remember US Van Westhuizen, captain of the World Cup winning Springbok team. He captained them afterwards, and they all stuck to him, to a man. Henry Roux speaking there about his memories of US as they found out about his disease and how it deteriorated. But that is where we're going to leave it now for this particular sports bulletin, as well as this hour's newsroom. It is now time for weather with Philip Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, let's take a look at that news. We're going to start off first of all with Southern Africa's rainfall, because here we're seeing low pressure systems really acting on the area, and what it's doing is it's bringing in showers and thunder showers throughout that entire region there. It's going to affect South Africa's northeastern areas. We're going to see showers and thunder showers progressing down in towards its southern coastlines as well. A little bit of rainfall in a slightly stronger band, predominantly over the northwest province as well, and we're also going to see that extending in towards Botswana and the surrounding areas, of course, into the Caprivi Strip, into Angola and into Central Africa too. In terms of your temperatures for today, well, let's see what's happening. Cape Town peaks at 24 degrees, Port Elizabeth at 37. It's going to be a hot one there in PE for today. A hot day forecast for generally for the southern interior of the country. Now moving north, we're going to see Pretoria at 29 degrees Celsius. We are expecting showers and thunder showers here later this afternoon and into the evening. For Gaborone, we're also expecting that 32-degree highs forecast there, and showers and thunder showers continuing through Beitbridge into Bulawayo and north as well. Windhoek's at 31 degrees. It should be a fairly dry there at the moment. Might just see a little bit of rainfall coming into the area in the form of storms. Brazzaville's at 32 degrees, Kinshasa 31. The Congo remains hot, and as we move through to the eastern parts of Central Africa, we're going to see a much drier story there, especially north of Nairobi. Kampala, Juba, Mogadishu, all of these areas are expecting a dry one for today. The rainfall really just barely making it in towards Nairobi there. Now, the southern coastlines of West Africa still expecting a little bit of rainfall there. Of course, this time of year, we do expect the rainfall to continue. It's nothing new. But what we're also seeing is a low-pressure system which has drawn in showers over that northern coastline there around Tunis and the surrounding areas. By tomorrow, we're going to see that continuing there and just spreading a little bit along that coastline, not making it very far into the interior at all, because of a high pressure system which is coming in. But right now, that low pressure system definitely having an effect on the temperatures of Benghazi and Tripoli, peaking at only 16 degrees Celsius. A little bit of rainfall, as we said, in Benghazi, but not very strong rainfall whatsoever. Mostly what you'll get there is windy conditions and cool conditions there. Tunis, the very same condition, although at a 17-degree high. Temperatures rising, moving towards Las Palmas and Rabat for today as a result of that high pressure system, and that is where we're going to leave your weather for now. But do remember, you are welcome to contact us with any questions, queries or feedback. Weather at sabc.co.za is our email, or call us 011 714 5077. That's it from me for now. Have a great day.
Campaign that is as a result of a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation grant to Good Business in Saatchi, South Africa. We've developed this campaign specifically to encourage the prevention of the bacterium. And this is aimed at people around anybody who coughs, for them to tell the person who coughs, hey Bowena, use your elbow. Motivation was really coming from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who are involved in a number of projects in South Africa. And one of the biggest challenges, as previously been said, is TB in South Africa. And the motivation is to affect behavior change. particularly with people who cough and who may be carrying the bacterium. So encouraging people to use the elbow clearly would reduce the spread of that airborne bacterium. Because the bacteria can live for 24 hours plus, you know, when you cough on your hands, you invariably touch hard surfaces or other people's hands and thereby spreading the bacteria. When you use your elbow, though, it significantly reduces that risk because most of the bacterium that you coughed out stays on your elbow or on your sleeve. It's such a light-hearted, easy way to get people to change their behavior. And therefore we believe it would be successful.
When you have a cough or if you have chest pains, think about your friends, think about your friends. When you feel a fever or if you sweat at night, look out for the signs, look out for the signs. I go when I hate, use your elbow when you cough. I go when I hate, use your elbow when you cough. Hey, hey, Nina, hey, use your elbow when you cough. Hey, hey, Nina, hey, use your elbow when you cough.
Jumbo Africa. This is the final hour here on Newsroom. I'm Elvis Preslin.
And I'm Kendall Makamati.
Our focus this morning is on tributes that are still pouring in from around the globe for the former Springbok captain, Joost. Now, Kendall, he died yesterday at the tender age of 45.
I think 10 is quite the right thing because he's really young. I mean, look at Eben, he's a month older than Joost, and he looks like a spring chicken.
There you go. And so we're asking you the question then today. How do you remember the former Springbok captain, Joost van der Westhuizen? Let's take a look at what you have to say.
Now, some comments that have come in since we last spoke. Sia France says, according to MND symptoms, that's muscular neuro disease symptoms, he gave his life to rugby and rugby gave life to him and sadly took life away from him.
Oh, that's from Sia there. This one from Alex says, Joost was a very quick player, a little bit thin compared to other rugby players, but very strong with self-confidence. Rest in peace, J9.
United Grootboom comes in with Aish. The legend has fallen. I will remember him as tall, clever scrum half.
Indeed, tall for a scrum half, hey? Very
he was,
tall.
That he was,
yes.
and very clever.
Very clever. This one from Tumelo says, I remember him as an icon, and may his soul rest in peace. Those are some of your comments with regards to the question, but Kendall, we're also conducting a poll today.
Yes, and our poll really is about another topical issue. And our poll really is about, we're asking you, should the places of worship discriminate against the LGBTI community be held accountable?
So far, we have 134 votes in. 57% of you are saying no, the churches should not be held accountable for discriminating against the LGBTI. And that's a very disturbing trend. For 43% are saying yes, they should.
We've got a whole, it's actually all places of worship, I think. And they're saying, look, regardless of what faith one has, shouldn't be held accountable. 57% say no.
20 hours to go. You can still get in on the poll and let us know what's on your mind. But right now, let's take a look at your news headlines. Former Springbok captain Joost van der Westhuizen's public memorial service will be held on Friday at Loftus Versfeld Stadium in Pretoria. And later that day, he will be laid to rest at a private funeral service. The Democratic Alliance says that free higher education is not the solution to the country's escalating university fees. And the fate of the suspended U.S. travel ban policy may be decided today by the country's Federal Appeals Court. Those are some of your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front.
Elvis, thank you very much. Quite a lot happening on the sports front. Yes, we are celebrating the life of a fallen hero, and we're also looking at other sports that's going to be happening over the course of the day. Now, messages of condolences have continued to pour in for the fallen former Springbok captain and 1995 World Cup winner, Joost van der Westhuizen. And we'll take a look at some of those messages a little later in the Sports Bulletin. Be sure to stick around for that. This is what else is coming up in sports.
We've got an important game tomorrow, and that's the main focus, is to try and win tomorrow's game, and then look at, obviously, Centurion.
The Proteas are intent on edging closer to inflicting a series whitewash on the touring Sri Lankans when they meet for their 4th ODI at Newlands this afternoon.
It's about how we apply ourselves and not really looking at who's chasing or who we are chasing, but like just looking at our course and finish it as best as we can.
And the PSL rolls back into action after a long hiatus, and SuperSport United are keen on retaining their status at the top of the log. Now, all this and more later on in the Sports Bulletin. Be sure to stay for this at 11:35. For now, it is back to Elvis, who's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Our top story this morning. South African rugby legend Joost van der Westhuizen's memorial service will be held at the Loftus Stadium in Pretoria, Loftus Versfeld Stadium, that is, in Pretoria this Friday. Now, that's according to his charitable organisation, J9. The foundation went on to say that a private funeral service will be held later the same day. The 45-year-old Joost van der Westhuizen passed away at his Johannesburg home after a 6-year battle with motor neuron disease.
Van der Westhuizen was diagnosed with the disease early in 2011 and showed tremendous fighting spirit as he did during his rugby career. Desperate to find a cure and assist those suffering from the disease, he established the J9 Foundation and, despite his condition, worked tirelessly in promoting the foundation's work. The foundation said in a statement following his passing that Van der Westhuizen was given a 20% chance of living for more than 2 years, but he defied all odds and lived for almost 6 years.
Yeah, obviously, we've been expecting it, unfortunately, and hoping it won't happen, but he put up a really brave fight, and, I think he made the world more aware of this terrible, terrible disease, the way he went around the world fighting on, and being a brilliant example for everybody. Look, I was fortunate to play with him, to play against him, and we had great times on the field together, and the team became like a family. So it's a huge loss, but I think what stands out most about him was the way he was a fighter on the field and off the field.
He made his Test debut in 1993 and scored a try in his very first Test match against Argentina.
Chance just pops it into, and this is a chance here for Ruben Creer. He's got Van der Westhuizen support. Joost van der Westhuizen, a try on his debut.
He played 89 tests for the Springboks and scored 38 tries, which was the record when he retired in 2003. Van der Westhuizen played in 3 World Cup tournaments, the most famous one in 1995, when the Springboks won the trophy. He was part of the 1998 Tri-Nations winning team, which he captained.
The test match is over. Joost van der Westhuizen is the skipper and the winning skipper for the first time in his career.
He captained the Boks 10 times, including at the 1999 World Cup, where the Boks beat England in the quarter-final, before going on to lose to Australia in additional time in the semi-final. Van der Westhuizen was also nominated for the SA Rugby Player of the Year award 6 times in the 90s. Among his other achievements are 2 Currie Cup titles and an induction into the World Rugby's Hall of Fame. Joost is survived by his 2 children, Jordan and Kylie, his parents Gustav and Mariana, and 2 brothers, Peter and Gustav. Harry Wollivier, SABC News.
Meanwhile, former Springbok coach Heineke Meyer also paid tribute to Joost van der Westhuizen.
Very sad, but I think we must celebrate his life, and he gave so much, and especially the last few years of his life, he changed so many people's lives. I've known Joost since he was a youngster. His family, he was still a student, and so I've known him for probably most of his life. And the things that stood out for me is his fighting spirit. You know, he was a true warrior. In 2002, nobody gave us a chance to win the Currie Cup. The Bulls was in a really bad state, and Joost was my captain, and he changed that whole team, and he was a guy that fought from the front. But I think a part of Joost that nobody knows is that he also had a soft side. And I remember when he was at the end of his career, he had a small function, and it wasn't a media function. And what was really great for me is, because it doesn't usually happen with players, he gave a jersey for every single guy that made a difference in his life. And there was 15 of us, and he gave us a framed jersey and just thanked me and his fellow coaches, and even his schoolboy coaches and the physios that helped him through his injuries. So he's also a guy that really appreciates what we've done for him, and for that, I'm still shocked to have the news, but for that I'll always be thankful. And he was an inspiring leader.
Joost van der Westhuizen passed away after a 6-year-long battle with motor neuron disease. Earlier, SABC News caught up with Karen Casey from the MND-ALS Association of South Africa to tell us more about motor neuron disease, or MND, known as amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. This is what she said.
The ALS stands for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and basically it's a broad term for the kinds of muscle weakness or muscle wasting that occurs in this disease, where specialized motor neuron cells actually start to degenerate both in the brain and in the spinal cord.
So I take it that there are different kinds of MND?
There are. There are 4 different kinds based on the type of nerve cell that's affected, as well as the part of the body where the symptoms first present. But ultimately, all 4 types lead eventually to muscle wasting or muscle weakness, and that would affect your speech muscles, your swallowing muscles, your breathing muscles, as well as your arms and your legs and your trunk.
It's amazing how you take things for granted. Every single day, just for me to hold this pen is the simplest thing, I think, but you get something like this and it turns into almost an impossibility. How do you get MND? Is it something, genetic, or is it something you pick up? How does it work?
So there are many theories that abound regarding the cause of MND, and researchers have kind of put it down to a perfect storm of factors. So there's suggestion that there might be an environmental or chemical toxin component, an infective viral agent component, perhaps even an immune component. And then, of course, in more recent years, they've discovered that perhaps repeated blows to the head or to the spine do in fact precipitate one towards MND. A study that was done amongst rugby players specifically found that there was a 6-fold increase in the chances of getting MND with that repeated body injury. Genetically, though, we only pick up MND in about 5 to 10% of cases.
Meanwhile, the DA says that free higher education is not the answer to escalating university fees. The party was one of the groups that made presentations to the Fees Commission. President Jacob Zuma set up the commission last year to investigate the feasibility of free higher education.
Of the Fees Commission. Its focus is on funding models for tertiary education. The DA wants student funding agency, NSFAS, remodeled, and for universities to receive bigger subsidies.
If you just give more and more money to fees, you're not going to solve the basic problems. One of which is a lack of subsidy money to places like universities. And this is the reason they keep putting fees up. They're not getting enough money. So if you address the subsidy question, you will be addressing the fees question.
Financial experts say it's not sustainable for government to fund free education. They've put forward other options that include a mix of public and private investment funding models.
This bond would be investors giving money to an intermediary. Usually this would be the private equity firm or an asset manager to manage the funds.
More parties, experts and civil society groups are expected to make presentations this week. Patricia Fasagi, SABC News in Centurion.
The executive mayor of Johannesburg, Herman Mashaba, has expressed his frustration at what he calls the lack of resolve from the Department of Home Affairs in dealing with porous borders and undocumented immigrants. Shaba's comments come in the wake of the torching of houses by residents of Rosettenville, south of Johannesburg. The houses are said to belong to foreign nationals who allegedly sell drugs and run prostitution rings in the suburb. The mayor and Gauteng police spokesperson Colonel Lungelo Dlamini spoke to Morning Live earlier this morning.
Government, Home Affairs in particular, as we arrest these people from tonight going forward, please tell us where to take them so that you can either issue them with documentation or you get them out of our country. That's all we can really do, because we can arrest them, we give them to subs, do we have enough prisons to keep them, and the following day they're back on our streets. And you can show, I mean, it's really sad on Sunday visiting the various communities how these criminal elements have no respect whatsoever for the laws of this country. They do it without any respect whatsoever. And our communities are so desperate. They can't sell their houses, they can't run anywhere. Where must our people run into the sea?
There are so many channels now. If they're not happy with the local police station, they can go to the cluster command. If they're not happy with the cluster commander, there is the provincial commissioner. If the provincial commissioner is not doing her work, they can also go to the national office. But we have got a hotline that, as I have said, they must phone that number and all those complaints will be dealt with. If the person who received the complaint does not do his work, we are also going to investigate that person and take that person out of the system.
Parliament has refuted reports of tightened security and media restrictions during this year's State of the Nation address. Now, it says that allegations that journalists will need escorts to move around the precinct on Thursday are unfounded. Yet, the Parliamentary Press Gallery Association has expressed concern over such reports, saying any such moves would impact media freedom.
The media has always applied for SONA accreditation, and media houses working from Parliament generally have freedom of movement. But this year, media personnel will reportedly be housed in a so-called media square. The PGA says it's been informed by Parliamentary Security that the media will be restricted to this area and only be allowed to move around provided there are escorts.
This is so concerning because never in South African parliamentary history have journalists been put under such constraints. For journalists to be corralled in or penned into a specific area for an event like this, which is for the people of South Africa, this event is not about one political party, it is about the whole country. It's a State of the Nation address. It marks the start of the parliamentary year. If this is under the tight security, draconian security, then what does it mean for the rest of the parliamentary? And it gives a lie to being the people's parliament.
Parliament insists the media square is a larger part of the precinct. It says reports of media personnel being assigned escorts are completely untrue.
The allegations of restrictions or the allegations of extraordinary security and curtailing of media operations has no basis, no foundation. Very clearly says nothing has changed in terms of the operational plans from what has been done over the past years or even a decade.
One change is certain at this year's State of the Nation address. The allocation of seats in the media gallery in the National Assembly will be reserved for selected journalists. The PGA has engaged with various media organizations on how to deal with the process. Abra Barbia, SABC News, Parliament.
The mining indaba got off to a fiery start in Cape Town yesterday. The Mining Minister, Mosebenzi Zwane, insisted that current safety laws would be respected, following an uproar from some companies that say that unnecessary safety stoppages are costing them millions. At the same time, Anglo-American CEO Mark Cutifani took a swipe at the notion of white monopoly capital.
Attendance numbers are up at this year's Indaba, suggesting some promise for the economy. Despite its declining trend over the decades, mining contributed 7% to economic growth in 2015 and employs close to 460,000 people. The mining minister, who wants a focus on junior miners this year, has been caught up in a tit-for-tat dispute over safety stoppages. Section 54 suspends operations if it is believed mine workers are at risk, resulting in major losses. But the minister says safety first.
The department will continue to enforce the legislation consistently, and I have full confidence in the officials who administer these laws.
While the minister said doors are always open and talks on regulation laws would continue, a dark cloud of uncertainty remains over the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Act. It's hardly moved since being published 4 years ago.
The mining industry has to have regulatory certainty and predictability in order for it to invest. Because at the end of the day, capital is unsentimental. It will go where the best investment opportunities are.
Anglo-American CEO Mark Utifani took a swipe at the notion of white monopoly capital.
Black South Africans own more than 45% of our South African mining assets. If people want to talk transformation and see transformation, come to Anglo-American. While we are the first to acknowledge that we have a long way to go, let no one mislead you on the facts. If we're going to have a debate, let's talk about the facts and the truth.
Investors and industry players here largely have a common message: reinvigorate the promise of mining. But it's easier said than done if differences on policy remain unresolved. What is clear, though, is that if the resolution is not near, South Africa could miss out on another potential commodity boom. Devin Murrigan, SABC News, Cape Town.
In international news, the United States Federal Appeal Court will hear arguments later today over whether to restore President Donald Trump's temporary travel ban on people from 7 Muslim-majority countries. Now, it's the most controversial policy of his 2-week-old administration. The lifting of the ban by the U.S. District Judge James Robart on Friday has opened a window for people from the 7 affected countries to enter the United States. The new Republican president has said that the travel measures are to protect the country against the threat of terrorism. Opponents say the 90-day ban is illegal. It bars entry for citizens from Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen, and also imposes a 120-day halt to all refugees. Now that's your news for now. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back after that.
Ever wondered what the State of the Nation address is? Well, wonder no more, because SABC News will bring you live coverage of the pomp and ceremony from Parliament. We'll focus on the people's expectations and, of course, President Jacob Zuma's address. We'll catch all of this live on SABC2, Channel 404, and your favorite radio station on the 9th of February.
The poultry industry says it's on the verge of collapse as it battles with an influx of cheap chicken imports brought into the country by European Union countries as well as the United States. Chicken producers, including Rainbow Chicken, are set to retrench more than 3,500 workers in one of the largest industry jobs bloodbaths as they struggle under heavy competition from cheap imported chicken from the European Union countries. Now, over 1,300 workers will be laid to rest, well, be laid off rather, by February. Now, how big will an impact of cheap chickens brought into the country have on those who work within the poultry industry? find out more, we're joined by FAO's Secretary General Katishi Masemola. Mr. Masemola, very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning and thanks for having us.
First and foremost, I'd like to get your reaction on the close to 3,000 people that will be losing their jobs by the end of February. Your thoughts?
Well, it's a sad day because these people are going to just be added on an army of the unemployed, now standing at 9 million. So as the days goes by, more people will be retrenched in the poultry sector if nothing is done. So we need that government intervention, and we think government has policy and other instruments to can defend this sector.
What do you think has led to this?
We think that the cheap imports from European Union are because of three factors. One, direct subsidies and support by their countries. Two, they do what is called product or portion subsidization, cross-subsidization. In other words, they sell the breast at premium in their countries and then sell the brown portions, thighs and drumsticks at ridiculously low prices in South Africa and elsewhere in the world.
And what impact does it have on our industry here in South Africa?
Well, what it means is that our producers cannot compete with the lowly priced chicken coming from European Union. 80% of the leg quotas are now coming directly from the European Union countries. And as a result, our fellows have no choice but to downscale their operations and thereby retrench workers.
Cheaper prices obviously mean cheaper prices for the consumer. They're very happy, but it's not a very happy thought for the industry.
Well, it is not, and that's why we'll encourage local citizens to basically buy local. And we also have to educate Europeans that as citizens, they must rise up because their countries are basically adding misery, or more misery rather, to our country.
Now, the EU did indicate that they're not really responsible for this crisis, but you have marched to the EU offices in Pretoria. Tell us about the march and what came out of that.
Well, about 800 of workers and managers marched to the EU embassy. In that march, we delivered a memorandum of petition, and part of that protest note included evidence that South Africa is the 5th most competitive chicken producer in the world, as confirmed by the International Poultry Association. We're exposing lies, actually, from European Union that our chicken producers are not competitive.
Is there anything else that the local producers can do in order to safeguard the job losses that we've seen that's been shedding in the industry?
Well, we'll urge them not to retrench workers, but rather to employ other options such as downscaling hours of work, so that the source of income still remains for those workers. But our government can employ anti-dumping duties. It can raise the tariff to levels that are effective and meaningful. It can employ safeguard measures to save the industry.
Aren't there currently tariffs for imports from other countries then?
Well, for our country, it's one of the most liberal when it comes to trade policy. And one of the few countries in the world that doesn't defend the chicken industry. And we'll urge our government to consider doing so. And join hundreds other countries that actually defend in their poultry industry.
Is there a measure that government really can use to change this? Because it is a tough fight, I might add, because it seems like there's a gun held to the head of South Africans to bring in these cheap imports.
Yeah, you see the trade balance between ourselves and the European Union, it's in our favor. So you're right. I mean, it's possible for the European Union to say, no, we'll block all other exports from South Africa to Europe, citrus and many other products. So it may result into some mini trade war, but our government must be ready for such a possible trade war.
Now, it's a number of people that's going to be laid off. What are the alternatives besides, if they do go, and if if the employer do not consider the option of maybe reducing the hours, what other options are there?
Well, we do not have other options. I mean, this industry is going to significantly downscale, such that it will only service fast food outlets. So it may reduce by about 60-65% if nothing has been done. So it is imperative, in fact compelling, for our government to do something. You know, a few years ago, Ghana as a country, because of chicken imports coming from European Union, the whole poultry sector was decimated until government intervened of Ghana. We call on the same for South African government to intervene.
Now, on another matter, over the weekend, a number of shop stewards met in Johannesburg to plot the way forward for the establishment of the new federation. Tell us about that. How did it go?
Well, the Shop Steward Council meeting was meant as a delivery of progress report. The progress report entailed two things. One, the state of readiness to launch the new federation, the registration process, the adoption of the draft constitution, the logos, the colors. So that was the one set of issues. The other set of issues was around campaigns on minimum wages, against labor brokers, and many other campaigns that we want to launch vigorously after launching.
What is the state of readiness of the new federation that you envisage?
Well, we believe that the tentative dates of the 24 to 26 March still remains, subject to how far we go on getting the certificate from the Department of Labor.
How many unions are we talking about that will merge together here to form the federation?
So far, 17 unions have pledged their allegiance to the new federation, and we hope many more independent unions will join us.
What numbers are we talking about, Mr. Masemola?
Well, at the moment, we're envisaging launching with about 700,000 members, and that's quite decent for a new federation to launch. In 1985, when COSATU was launched, it had about 400,000, so it's not a bad number to start with.
And how would you compare then to COSATU once you've launched in terms of numbers?
Well, we don't hope to compete with COSATU because 74% of workers in this country are not belonging to unions. So we're not going to be fighting for members with COSATU. We're going to focus on those that are not in unions. But also, it will be different to COSATU in that we would not be constrained by party political allegiance. So ours will be to recruit all workers irrespective of their political persuasions.
Will this then focus predominantly on the issue of the worker?
Well, we will focus on issues of workers, but we will not turn a blind eye on policy issues, on government policy, and broadly the working class struggles in society.
Mr. Masemola, we're looking forward to the launch of the new federation, and we'll be talking to you shortly again to find out what is the status quo and an update, perhaps in another couple of weeks.
Thank you.
That was FAO Secretary General Katishi Masemola talking to us about the poultry industry's projected job losses due to cheap chicken imports by the European Union countries and the United States, and we're not even forgetting Brazil, but especially from the United States. You know, AGOA has probably put that gun to our heads, but that's where we got to leave it for now. You also talked to us about the new federation that will be launched shortly, and we'll keep you abreast of that one. Remember, you heard it first, right here on the Newsroom. We'll take a break. We'll be right back with your sports news.
Typhoid outbreak that broke out in Zimbabwe's capital late last year has claimed the life of a 13-year-old girl in Harare's township of Mbare.
Most residents have put the blame on the Zimbabwean government for the debilitating economic situation.
There is no interest in the affairs of the city and the town, and really we have to do something about it.
One expert believes the Barclays ABSA apartheid funding saga reeks of political factionalism. Yanni Rousseau
says things are not as they seem.
And the money, well, that was whisked out of the country.
ABSA paid full value for the assistance. So from that perspective, I cannot see how it can be made out that ABSA benefited.
The issue of SABC Mhlongo, the choreographer, and the Grace Bible Church, where there are other incidents that the LGBTI community also goes through that go unreported, that's another question that we want to find out. To find out more, we are joined by Jay McLeod. He is from OUT. It's an NGO that fights for the rights of the LGBTI community. A very good morning to you, Jay, and welcome.
Thank you for having me over. A very good morning to you too.
First and foremost, I would like to get your reaction to the incident that happened at the Grace Bible Church with SABC Mhlongo. What do you make of that?
Well, you know, that incident is one of many that LGBTI people go through on a daily basis. And I think it took a person who had enough courage and guts to actually stand up to the authorities and say that hate speech is not acceptable, to attack people on who they are.
So you would suggest that this is hate speech, and it had nothing to do with the Bible?
Well, the two are linked. I mean, people are using the Bible, or rather are abusing the Bible to justify their hate speech. And I mean, if a person in a powerful position as being like a minister, you know, it's a powerful position, it's a position of influence. And if somebody were to say that a group of people are wrong or are immoral or are worse than dogs and being compared to animals, that is totally unacceptable. And it does form as a form of a hate speech towards a targeted vulnerable group.
Are you aware of any other incidents that were perpetrated against the LGBTI community members that have gone through a similar type of incident but has gone unreported, so to speak? But because of this one, because SABC is a celebrity, it became a big media hype.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, like the thing about, like I said earlier on, LGBTI people go through this on a daily basis from their families, in their communities, even society at large, in their work environments, in a lot of different social circles as well. And I suppose, like I said, it had to take somebody to have enough guts and courage to speak up against such great authorities. We've got a lot of research and stories based on facts of people being discriminated from a hate speech all the way to an actual physical crime being done to them because of who they are. So, and it's quite ironic because we're living in a country, a democratic country nonetheless, not a Christian country, not a whatever country, but a democratic country that says and protects everybody, that nobody should be discriminated on the basis of a number of things, age, gender, sexual orientation, and so forth. So to have people in authority or people in powerful positions to demean and indignify a group of people, it should be totally unacceptable, and people should be held accountable. Just as the same way, if somebody were to do hate speech around race, you know, the same should apply to that.
Do you think that the prevention and combating of hate crimes and hate speech bill that is on the cards will assist and perhaps help in preventing situations like this from happening again?
Well, definitely. I mean, like, to have it as a bill, to have it in the law, it will go a long way. But of course, you know, between the law and the ground, there still needs to be a lot of translation because, again, we've got the perfect constitution, but people on the ground are still being discriminated against. People are losing their jobs, people are losing their friends, people are being kicked out of their homes because of who they are. So if we have the bill in place, it can actually be a stronger thing to stand on, to hold people accountable.
What is your message to the LGBTI community or members that are currently living in silence to this abuse?
Well, you know what, it's very difficult, and it's very different from person to person. The message from our organization to the people who are LGBTI is to think that you don't owe anybody to come out. And by coming out, I mean telling the next person of this part of your life, whether you're a lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or intersex. Because coming out is a very risky thing to do sometimes, because when you come out, you can lose your friends, your family, work, and even your life. But rather focus on yourself, come out to yourself, expose yourself to healthy information regarding human sexuality so that you can normalize this part of your life. Because if you listen to a lot of prejudice that is external, a lot of prejudice that is spewed by people in powerful authorities, then you're going to develop internalized homophobia, and you're going to battle, and you can inflict yourself and put yourself in vulnerable situations where you will need coping things. And usually a lot of LGBTI people become vulnerable to things like alcohol and drugs because it's so difficult to be an LGBTI person. It's so difficult to live in a society that constantly tells you that who you are is less than, that you are not worthy of good things, that you are nothing basically. So to the LGBTI people who are in silent, it does not mean that you have to come out wherever you are, but come out to yourself and get yourself proper health information regarding human sexuality.
As out, what do you suggest? How do we promote the intolerance in our country?
You know, I think it cuts across all departments. I mean, what's so interesting with our organization is we're getting a lot of requests from different kinds of sectors and departments reaching out and saying, please come in and help us integrate healthy, appropriate information in understanding diversities. We're getting requests from even other churches as well, who are realizing the fact that for a long time they've been excluding these kinds of people, they've been harming these kinds of people, so they want to understand. So we are building dialogues with them and trying to create a safer space for all. And I salute those churches, but of course, like in everything, there are other people who are quite behind on it, hiding behind and abusing things like the Bible, which is quite unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. Jay, I'd like to thank you and all good luck for the future.
No, thank you for having us.
That was Jay Matlow. He is from OUT, the organization or the NGO that represents the rights of members of the LGBTI community.
Now, while we have been focusing on the passing of Springbok legend US funders Westhuizen, we have other sports that's been on the cards and on the go. For example, SuperSport United's focus for the second half of the Absa Premiership is to play better than they have played, turn performances into victories and be consistent. The league resumes today after a long break due to the Africa Cup of Nations as well as Christmas. United currently top the log on goal difference.
They have a slim lead over a bunch of teams just behind them. Normally, they would be looking very closely at what their opponents are up to. But they, SuperSport United, will do things differently during the second half of the season.
For us, it's about the journey. It's about how we apply ourselves and not really looking at who's chasing or who we are chasing, but like just looking at our course and finish it as best as we can.
Stuart Baxter finds himself in a similar situation when he was at Kaizer Chiefs 2 seasons ago. He went into the break leading the chasing pack. Amakosi went on to win the championship. This time around, he boosted his squad with a number of players who were with him at Naturena. But he doesn't think that it gives them an edge over the other teams.
Experience is always a good thing. If you've been there before, you know how it feels, you know how to respond. I don't think it makes it easier for us because we've got to still do the job. I think it's having the experience, and they can talk about it with other players that didn't have the experience. Yeah, that's nice to have, but it's not one of those that gives you any guarantees. You've still got to do the job.
One of the players that was with him at Chiefs is Mandla Masango. The Bafana winger did not get enough game time in his second season at Randers FC in Denmark. He is likely to make the team against Golden Arrows on Tuesday, but it's unclear in what capacity due to lack of fitness.
I think he's relieved to be out of the situation that he was in. I think he's pleased to be around players that respect him and a coaching staff that's going to encourage him. So we're hoping that will give him a good headspace and that we'll get some performances from him.
You know, if Baxter, he calls and say, hey, come, I'll go anywhere, wherever he is, because he's a good coach, he's a good person individually, and SuperSport is a good team, well-structured team, and they are challenging for the league, as well as we have quality players, like you said, so I want to be part of that also.
Challenging for the league title could be distracted by the hectic schedule ahead. United have the Nedbank Cup to defend. They also have the CAF Confederations Cup fixtures coming up soon. SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now, the South African cricket team has already secured the 5-match one-day series against Sri Lanka, but they are determined to make it a clean sweep against the tourists. The teams clash at Newlands today, with South Africa leading 3-0 after having become the #1 ranked team after their victory over Sri Lanka on Saturday.
The Proteas have dominated and have been too strong for Sri Lanka all summer. But not too many teams do well against the Proteas in South African conditions. The Proteas have won 12 consecutive one-dayers on home soil. They came from behind to beat England 3-2. They then had a 1-0 victory against Ireland and then a 5-0 whitewash against Australia.
Look, for us, it's taking it game by game. Yes, the end result is 5-0, but we've got an important game tomorrow, and that's the main focus, is to try and win tomorrow's game, and then look at, obviously, Centurion. But it's been going really well. I mean, we've ticked all the boxes that we needed to tick, playing as well as we can.
The Proteas squad has shown depth, with all-rounder Dwayne Pretorius getting a game at the Wanderers and walking away with a Man of the Match award. Left-arm Chinaman Tabrei Shamsi is the only member of the squad not to get a game yet. But the Proteas have been too strong with bat, ball and in the field against Sri Lanka, and the clash at Newlands should be no different.
It definitely is, and tomorrow's also a special game where we playing in the remembrance of the firefighters. They've been doing such a great job for all the fires here in Cape Town, so it'll be good to see them come out and support us tomorrow.
The Newlands faithful will be hoping that the Proteas bat first and that they get to see the likes of Quinton de Kock, Hashim Amla, A.B. de Villiers and company in action. Although the Proteas have already secured the series and lead 3-0, they'll be desperate to claim a 5-0 whitewash. If they do that, they'll overtake Australia as the #1 ranked team in the world in one-day cricket. Craig Murray, SABC News, Cape Town.
That's right, we're just waiting to see how they do against Sri Lanka today, and should they win, they do become the #1 ranked team in ODIs. That match will start at 1:30 p.m. this afternoon. Our story that quite a few people have been waiting for, that actually is creating a bit of a buzz in South African sporting circles, is that South Africa's got a new artistic gymnastics star, a 9-year-old Zainab Nkiwane. The buoyant rising star is already a force to be reckoned with, having won gold in the Gauteng Championships and silver at the National Championships 2 months ago. She wants to go and represent her country in the regional championships in Namibia later this year. Mdudu Ndlovu reports.
Zainab started with gymnastics for the first time 2 years ago and never looked back. She is just a natural and has taken to the sport like a fish to water. Zainab climbed up the ladder in no time, and because of her enthusiasm and dedication, she was allowed to skip levels 3 and 5. She is currently doing level 6.
I was in level 2. Then my coach decided to move me to level 4. And I only had like a bit of weeks to practice for the competition. And I went to an oceans competition in Durban. And it was very nerve-wracking because I didn't really know the dances properly. So I dropped a lot at oceans. It wasn't very neat and tidy. Then as I got to Central Gauteng, I improved, and it just made things work, and yeah. I thought I was gonna drop in rope, but I actually didn't. Did pretty well, and yeah. And hoop, sort of. Well, I didn't even get a 13, I got 13.05.
Keep on shining and be the star that you are.
Okay.
We'll be here all the way with you. We'll be watching you and following your work, okay?
Okay.
She specializes in 3 disciplines: free dance, balls, and clubs. The world of gymnastics is breaking about 1 Simone Biles of the United States of America. South Africa, now it's time to break about one of your own. Here is Zainab. She's the future of South African gymnastics. Extra coaching sessions under her former school coach, Natalia Pazakish. Her new coach at St. Mary's School sings her praises.
I only started coaching her from January 2017, which is only 1 month. But I really see potential, and I can see she's working very hard, and I really think she's future rhythmic gymnastic South African star.
If she keeps on getting accolades like she is currently doing, the sky is the limit for the free-spirited 9-year-old. And she could even win some medals for South Africa at Commonwealth and Olympic Games in the future. Mduduzi Ndlovu, SABC News in Johannesburg.
Right, now the governing body of World Athletics has put an immediate stop to changes of nationality by athletes. IAA President Sebastian Coe said a working group would be set up to agree new rules by the end of this year. Meanwhile, Russian track and field athletes look certain to miss out on this year's World Championships after an IAAF task force recommended that the country's ban should run until November.
There will be no reinstatement until RUSADA is functioning. And there was one milestone in May where they will start conducting testing, and there will be, presumably, if everything goes in accordance with the plan, be a full reinstatement by November 2017, which means that Russia as a nation, or RUSAF, is not recommended by us to be reinstated until that time. Now, the participation from Russian athletes is a different issue, because since June of last year, there has been a possibility for athletes to apply for eligibility to participate in international competitions. That still stands.
Now, before we sign off from Newsroom, here are a few words from Joost van der Westhuizen, the man himself, when he was still in his prime.
As a deleted team, but also I'm very honored to play with such a group of talented players, and it makes it so much easier for me because they're really high standard players and they also know what they want, and they're also leaders in their position, and it makes it so much easier for me.
That's it. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock sharp till midday. You've been watching Newsroom. I'm Kendall Makhamate. Until then, this is